Chapter 385. Sir, the great Xia soldiers haven't broken camp yet. It seems like they won't be leaving today. A scout reported from the walkie-talkie. Continue to pay attention, Li Qinqiu said simply. Ren Baqian heard this and laughed. It seems like the great Xia soldiers have chosen their burial ground. Although it's a little desolate, the scenery isn't bad. In that case, let's fulfill their wish, Li Qinqiu said in a deep voice. According to the route of the reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South, they should be able to meet at noon. This reinforcements had a radio station that could be contacted at any time, and it would be easy to meet up. Together with these 5,000 soldiers, it was enough to bury the great Xia soldiers here. There were still 2.5 days before they could leave Dayo, and the great Xia soldiers wouldn't be able to escape even if they scattered. Ren Baqian got up from the ground and stretched himself. He looked at the aboriginal soldiers who were lying down and sleeping on the ground in front of him and thought that this sudden war was finally coming to an end. In 1.5 months, more than 500,000 people had died. The war in this world was simple, primitive, and cruel. Next, it was time to pick up the Empress. A rainbow cloud. Fortunately, it wasn't a rainbow cloud that could fly. Otherwise, he would be at a loss. Li Qinqiu stayed by the radio station the entire morning to know the movements of the reinforcements. Before noon, the reinforcements encountered the scouts sent by Li Qinqiu. Just after noon, they saw a few goat-riding riders coming from afar. Sir, they have arrived. Good. Li Qinqiu said in a deep voice. He didn't move, but a moment later, a dense mass of troops appeared in his field of vision. Above the troops were a few flags with the words, Imperial South. These were the reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South. 5,000 valiant soldiers carrying bundles on their backs, wearing leather armor that only covered the left side of their bodies, and wielding long sabers stopped 500 meters away. Following which, a few generals dismounted from their 4-corned cows and went straight to Li Qinqiu's position. Are you Sir Li? Greetings, Sir Li. The 5,000 soldiers have arrived. A few of them stepped forward and saw Li Qinqiu produce a token. After which, they cupped their fists and handed a token to Li Qinqiu. Thank you for your hard work along the way. Li Qinqiu nodded as he stuffed the token into his waist pocket. Everyone seems to be tired. Let the soldiers rest first. Light a fire and eat. In the afternoon, recharge and build up energy. At night, we will attack. In the evening, all of you will come and receive orders. After this battle, this old man will invite everyone to a banquet. Yes. The generals obeyed. Originally, Ren Baqian thought that there would be a lot of things to hand over after the two of them met up. He didn't expect that they would only hand over a token and only say a few words before it was over. It was straightforward and efficient. After the few of them returned, Li Qinqiu said, "The one in front is Hongzi, the son of the general-in-chief who supports the nation. He didn't disgrace his father's reputation." Only then did Ren Baqian know that Hong Wu's son was actually among the reinforcements. Hong Wu's son, Hong Xian's father. He had some impression of him. Back then, Du Chongkong had mentioned that Hong Xian's grandfather was Hong Wu and her father was a military officer in the Protectorate of the South. However, ever since the Great Hunt, Ren Baqian hadn't had any dealings with people with the surname Hong, so he didn't pay much attention to it. However, after thinking about it carefully, he really didn't have any impression of the few people he saw just now. Even though he wasn't face-blind, the most prominent characteristics of the Aboriginals were their well-developed muscles and broad bodies. As for their appearances, most of them had fierce faces, so it was really difficult to distinguish them. The reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South rested for the entire afternoon. When it was almost evening, Li Qinqiu called for a few generals to make arrangements. In fact, there weren't many arrangements. This time, they were going to attack by force, break up Great Xia, and then pursue them. First, Renbachin used the mortars to disrupt the enemy's formation. Then, the winged cavalry charged in like a blade, followed by Li Qianqiu's men. On the other hand, the Protectorate of the South took a detour and launched a pincer attack from another direction. The winged cavalry and Li Qianqiu's troops attacked from the southwest, while the Protectorate of the South attacked from the southeast, driving the Great Xia army to the north. 12,000 soldiers against less than 90,000 soldiers. There was no need to consider anything else, and they just had to attack by force. After defeating the enemy, the winged cavalry continued to pursue them at the front. As long as the defeated Great Xia soldiers tried to form a small group, the winged cavalry would break them up and defeat them. This would make it easier for the soldiers at the back to pursue and attack. Li Qianqiu took out a few walkie-talkies and handed them to the generals from the Protectorate of the South. It was more convenient to use these things on the battlefield. After making some simple arrangements, everyone went back to make preparations. After dinner, everyone who had just rested for the entire afternoon got up and used the whetstones they brought along to sharpen their swords. The winged cavalry and Li Qianqiu's troops all had pained expressions on their faces. These days, they had participated in more battles, and the blades of their swords were full of big and small nicks like saw blades. Putting aside the hatred between their nation and their families, these swords were their lifeblood. Seeing their lifeblood in such a state made them hate Great Xia to the core. Everyone waited until it was past midnight before they got up and set off. According to the schedule, they would attack at the intersection of the Hour of the Ox and the Hour of the Ox. If they attacked at this time, it would be dawn in 2 hours, and it would be easier to pursue them. "They have discovered us," the mounted scout said through the walkie-talkie. Renbachin rolled his eyes. Wasn't this nonsense? Li Qianqiu's troops were almost at the entrance of Great Xia's barracks. Renbachin could see their sentries with his naked eyes, and they should have discovered them even if they were blind. Renbachin got down from the four-corned cow and asked Li Qianqiu to bring him to a high place to see the position of the Great Xia army. After he came down, he began to adjust the muzzle of his cannon. However, when he was high up in the sky, he realized that the enemy's formation had changed. Instead of everyone standing together like before, they were divided into the center, left, and right flanks. Instead, they were divided into nearly 20 small formations. They are also thinking of countermeasures. If such a small formation were to be bombarded, it would obviously be easier for them to regroup than before. Renbachin asked Li Qianqiu to bring him up into the sky 3 times. After coming down, he drew the positions of the 20 small formations on the ground, calculated in his mind, and wrote down the numbers on the ground. After that, everyone began to wait in silence. At this moment, the inside and outside of the barracks were filled with a somber atmosphere. Inside was the Great Xia army, and outside was the Aboriginal army. It seemed like they were on the verge of breaking out. This kind of atmosphere was extremely depressing. It was as if a heavy stone was pressing on one's heart, making one want to shout and vent. "Ah!" Renbachin shouted. Everyone turned to look at him. "Don't bother about me. My throat is just itchy and I want to shout." Renbachin waved his hand. "How much longer?" "Another 15 minutes. "Call me in another 15 minutes, Renbachin replied. After a while, one of the guards said, "Sir, it's time. Get to work." Renbachin opened the lid of the box at the side and revealed the cannonballs below. "Hold them." Renbachin gestured. As per usual, 2 guards immediately came forward to hold the cannonballs. Boom! Boom! 2 cannonballs directly exploded in the middle of the Great Xia army. Following which, all the Great Xia soldiers did the same action and squatted down with their hands on their heads. More than 80,000 people squatted down with their hands on their heads at the same time. The scene was extremely spectacular. In the next 7 minutes, Renbochin fired a total of 40 cannonballs, which was close to 6 per minute. According to his memory, each of the 10 small formations was rewarded with 4 cannonballs. In such a short period of time, he wouldn't be able to adjust anymore. Furthermore, some of the formations in the middle had already reorganized their formation by the time the winged cavalry arrived. Kill! Li Qinqiu didn't even look at the results of Renbochin's battle. When the time was up, he let out a long roar. The 1,000 winged cavalry warriors immediately went from static to dynamic after the order was given. It only took them 11 to 12 seconds to cross a distance of 200 meters and rush into the Great Xia barracks at an even faster speed. Kill! All sorts of shouts could be heard from the Great Xia barracks. When Li Qinqiu and his men also rushed in, Renbochin sat on the ground. There was nothing else for him to do after this, and this war had basically come to an end. Renbochin took out a piece of white rabbit creamy candy from his pocket and threw it into his mouth. He lay on the ground and looked at the stars for a long time. Suddenly, he remembered that this bag of white rabbit creamy candy had been with him for a long time and hadn't been used up. If Lin Chaola was here, he probably wouldn't be able to last more than a few days. Lin Chaola. Renbochin first thought of the sleeping goddess. Then, he suddenly realized that where was his big bodyguard? When the Empress was in Liao City, Lin Chaola found a place to sleep. However, after the Empress left, he also forgot about her. She left Liao City just like that. Chapter 386. After the reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South attacked from the southeast, it didn't take long for the Great Xia army to collapse. The sounds of battle began to move north from the camp. Let's go. Renbochin stood up and patted his buttocks. This was already the last battle. What followed next would be endless pursuit and killing. It had nothing to do with him anymore. Inform Sir Li that we will leave first and wait for them in Liao City. Renbochin instructed a guard to inform Sir Li. In a while, he would make a trip back to Earth. After which, he would head to Liao City and wait for the winged cavalry to arrive before heading to Tisua Pass to fetch the Empress. A moment later, he suddenly thought of something and walked into the Great Xia barracks. At this moment, the Great Xia army was already fleeing towards the north, and there weren't many people left in the barracks. Only the ground was littered with severed corpses. The aboriginals were too strong, especially the winged cavalry warriors. Most of the time, their blades would be cut in half. As a result, the ground was littered with severed limbs and internal organs. It was a disgusting sight. Can you tell if a person was an expert just by looking at the corpse? Renbochin asked the bodyguard. I can't tell. The guards were dumbfounded. Telling whether a person was an expert from a corpse was the same as asking them if they could tell whether an animal was male or female when it was alive. Renbochin was a little disappointed. With so many corpses, it wasn't easy to find a few experts. "Milord, this subordinate might be able to give it a try," a guard suddenly said. "Find me the corpses of 2 experts, and I'll give you half a kilogram of white rabbit creamy candies when you're done." The guard scratched his head. What the hell was a big white rabbit? Then, he chuckled, "Let's talk about it after I find it. But you have to change the reward." Following that, everyone watched as he rummaged through the crowd. He didn't rummage through them one by one. Instead, he would look down from time to time as he walked through the crowd before shaking his head and leaving. Clearly, he had a clear goal in mind. After half an hour, he came back dragging 2 armored corpses. "My lord. This person's strength should not be low." Renbochin looked at that person's attire and suddenly realized that he had forgotten about this matter. The generals of this world, even if they were not top-notch experts, would not be too weak. "Milord, this person seems to be a commandant, and from the injuries on his body, it seems that he wasn't killed in one blow." Looking at the position of the blade and the blunt tip, it was obvious that this was a weapon used by the winged cavalry. The winged cavalry was too strong, and they didn't need a sharp blade to kill someone. Furthermore, a sharp blade would break easily. Therefore, the winged cavalry used a rounder blade. Furthermore, he didn't kill the winged cavalry warrior in one blow. Instead, he had 4 wounds on his body. This shows that he had exchanged blows with the winged cavalry warrior several times. He is at least an intermediate earth will expert or even an advanced earth will expert. After listening to his analysis, Renbochin was immediately shocked. There was actually such a smart guard among his group of guards. What a genius! He remembered this person's name. His name was Shiyu. Although he was an earth will expert, these guards were all earth will experts. Usually, he didn't see anything outstanding about them. Well done. Renbochin praised. Shiyu chuckled. What reward do you want? Milord, you have collected a lot of weapons these days. Among them, there is a saber that I covet. Since you don't use a saber, I would like to ask for it. Shiyu immediately answered. He had been eyeing that saber for some time, but hadn't had a suitable opportunity. It just so happened that Renbochin wanted to find the corpse of an expert from a pile of tens of thousands of corpses today. He immediately knew that the opportunity had come. Meritorious service will be rewarded. You can pick one yourself later. Renbochin nodded. Those weapons were left behind by the great Xia practitioners a few days ago. Renbochin picked some that looked good and kept them. Since Shiyu wanted them, it didn't matter if they were given to him. Thank you, milord. Shiyu immediately expressed his gratitude with a happy look on his face. The other guards were also envious. A good saber was more important to them than any treasure and even more important than a wife. The same goes for all of you. Work hard, and you will naturally be rewarded, Renbochin added. Thank you, milord. Everyone thanked him in unison. Even though it was more dangerous to follow Renbochin, it was mainly because he was always being assassinated. He was still weak and had to rely on his guards to protect him. However, Renbochin wasn't a stingy person. He had a lot of tricks up his sleeves and had a close relationship with the Empress. Everyone naturally believed what he said. Search again and find the corpse of another expert. Renbochin said to Shiyu. After that, Renbochin waited there while a few of the guards went into the pile of corpses to help search. After a long time, they finally found a second corpse. Looking at the armor on the body, it was also a captain. Renbochin was satisfied with finding 2 corpses. Stuff the internal organs back in and block them up. Renbochin pointed at the 2 corpses that had their internal organs trailing along. It was best to bring the internal organs back as well. Who knew if there was any difference in the internal organs of an earth will expert and an ordinary person? Renbochin brought everyone to a remote place and got someone to put the bundle of sabers and swords on the 4-horned cow's back on the ground. See which one you want. Shiyu was ecstatic. She immediately took out a saber and held it with both hands. Milord, this is the one. Renbochin held it in his hands. It was very heavy and weighed at least 50 to 60 kilograms. The scabbard was a greenish copper scabbard, and the handle was wrapped in animal skin. After pulling the saber out of the scabbard, Renbochin immediately knew why it was so heavy. The thickest part was as thick as 2 fingers, and the widest part near the scabbard was as wide as a palm. The back of the saber was a straight line, and the blade drew an arc from the widest part all the way to the tip. The body of the saber was 1 meter long and looked somewhat like an enlarged boning knife. Clang! Renbochin sheathed the saber and threw it to the expectant Shiyu. It's yours. Thank you, milord. Shiyu hugged the saber happily as if she was hugging her wife. After that, Renbochin tied up the 2 corpses, got everyone to leave, and brought the corpses back to Earth. These corpses were prepared for the research institute. Although the progress of martial arts on Earth wasn't low, those who practice martial arts were already close to the manual level. After obtaining the martial arts, their progress was naturally very fast. In the future, their progress would probably slow down. Ren Baqin couldn't wait. He was still waiting for Earth to research something that he wanted. It wasn't just the Earth wheel, but the most important thing was the spirit wheel. It was a smooth path for him to advance to the Earth wheel level, but the method to advance to the spirit wheel level was vague in visualization. He didn't want to be dumbfounded when he reached the peak of the Earth wheel level. In any case, the research on Earth would be of great benefit to him. After returning to Earth, he first threw the 2 corpses into the bathroom, found a large bag, and put the corpses in the trunk. During this process, he had the illusion that he was dismembering the corpses. In Deo, there was nothing wrong with carrying these corpses around. However, on Earth, the feeling of putting the corpses in the trunk was extremely strong. The main reason was that the environment was different. On Earth, this scene was too familiar as it was shown in the movies. Ren Baqin reckoned that he would be stopped by the police on the way to the research institute, which would be perfect. Next, it would be an action movie or the rule of law. Chapter 387. Check. The policeman outside the car knocked on the window. Ren Baqin searched his body. He still had his identification from a certain department. In the end, after searching all over, he didn't even have his wallet. Nowadays, people use their mobile phones to pay for lollipops when they go out. Who would still bring their wallet or ID? Wait, let me make a call. Ren Baqin said as he lowered the window. No matter who you call, you have to check first. The police officer didn't give him a good look. He hated people who called for small matters like this. If he didn't do this, he wouldn't be able to show his identity. The country's secret department. Some of the things in the car are classified. Ren Baqin said with a straight face. He had really raised a flag. Whatever you want comes to you. There weren't many police officers going in and out of the car, but there were 2 corpses in the trunk. He did not want to go to the police station. The policeman heard his words and curled his lips. Secret department. How could there be so many secret departments? Please show me your identification. I didn't bring it. Ren Baqin answered honestly. Ren Baqin ignored him and called Yang Senator. When Yang Sen picked up the phone, Ren Baqin finally heaved a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Yang Sen did not bring his cell phone with him or was temporarily unable to answer the call. If that was the case, Ren Baqin would be in big trouble. I was stopped by the police on the road for an inspection. There are some confidential items in my car. Get someone to pick them up. Ren Baqin said straightforwardly and gave the address. After making the call, Ren Baqin spread his hands at the policeman, leaned back in his seat, and waited for him to come over. Remove the key. The policeman said. He only relaxed a little after Ren Baqin removed the key from the car. Ren Baqin's behavior made him believe that there was definitely something shameful in the car. On the other hand, Ren Baqin had nothing to fear. Furthermore, he did mention that it was confidential information when he made the call. This made him hesitate for a moment whether he should force the other party to come down. After all, no one would believe that he was from a secret department without any identification. At this moment, a police officer came over with a dog. The dog immediately barked at Ren Baqin's carriage. Let him come down and open it. The police officer who came later immediately said in a deep voice. This dog was a police dog specialized in drug detection, but in addition to drug detection, it was also very sensitive to another smell, which was the smell of blood. So when he saw the police dog's reaction, he immediately became vigilant. The policeman from before immediately stepped forward to explain. The two of them looked at Rinpoche while reporting to him through the walkie-talkie. "Sir, please get out of the car and open the trunk for inspection." One of them reported through the walkie-talkie and nodded to the person beside him. Rinpoche turned to look at the policeman outside the window and sighed. "Like I said, they'll be here soon. Do you want him to call your superior first?" Rinpoche asked. "Please get out of the car." One of the policemen extended his hand to his waist. Rinpoche was helpless. He really didn't want to cause any trouble. He opened the door, got out of the car, walked around, and held his phone in one hand as he leaned against the car. "The inspection won't take too long, right? I can't run here. I've already said that the things in the carriage are confidential, so I'll just wait here. I won't make things difficult for you, so don't look for trouble for yourselves, right? We'll know when the people arrive." After hearing what he said, the two policemen used the walkie-talkie to report again. This time, they didn't say anything else. One of them watched Rinpoche from the side while the other continued to check with the police dog. "What kind of case do you have?" Rinpoche asked curiously. "This is confidential," the policeman retorted. "What skincare products do you use? You don't tan at all after running around every day. Can you recommend them?" Rinpoche asked again. He felt that he had been tanning very quickly recently. The sun in Dayo was very strong, and he didn't have the resistance to the sun like the Aboriginals. After living in the wilderness for a few days, even the Empress couldn't recognize him. The policeman was speechless when he heard this. How could Rinpoche find something to say? "We're on a mission. Be serious. We're on the same side. Why are you so serious? It's not easy in any department." Rinpoche laughed mischievously. If Yongsen heard this, he would have vomited blood. It was always others who had it hard. Since when was it his turn to have it hard? Rinpoche was also bored, mainly because he didn't have much to say to those barbarians in Dayo. They wouldn't understand anything he said, and it was no different from playing the lute to a donkey. It was rare that he had nothing to do now, so he bragged for a while and enjoyed the peaceful daily life on Earth. After he nagged for a long time, the policeman helplessly asked, "Are you really from the secret department?" He had never seen such a chatterbox in a secret department. Wasn't the secret department supposed to be tight-lipped first? He couldn't tell why this person was tight-lipped at all. Guaranteed to be fake. "Do you know about the M78 galaxy? We are the Messier 87 department, which specializes in studying aliens." Rinpoche continued to boast. "Not only do I know about M78, but I also know about Ultraman Tiga." The policeman couldn't help but say, "Comrade." After waiting for a long time, Rinpoche finally waited for the person arranged by Yang Sr. In fact, before that person came, Yongsen had already called the police station, and the police station then called the team leader who was on a mission. Finally, the news reached the police officer, and the two of them chatted happily. Rinpoche was still a little reluctant to leave as he hadn't met someone who could talk so much with him in a long time. When he arrived at the building where the Messier 87 department was located, he immediately saw Yongsen and his men waiting in the parking lot. What did Mr. Rin bring? Everyone looked expectant. 2 corpses of Earth Will experts, Rinpoche said. There were actually quite a lot of these corpses some time ago, and even Spirit Will experts had them. For example, Lu Chi's head was said to be smelly when hung on the city wall. However, Yongsen and the others were immediately excited. To them, the value of these 2 corpses was no less than that of the 2 Ultraman from the M78 galaxy. One had to know that they had only seen a few words about Earth Will experts from the secret manuals that Rinpoche had given them. Everyone knew that Earth Will experts were very powerful and far exceeded the limits of humans, but they didn't know exactly how powerful they were. There were too many things that could be studied from these two corpses, and they represented the direction of human evolution in the future. Their value couldn't be measured with money. No one expected that Rinpoche, who had always brought small things over, would actually bring back such important things this time. However, when the bag in Rinpoche's trunk was opened, everyone felt that these two corpses were really miserable. None of them were intact, and they were both chopped into two pieces. Some of them were even missing limbs and other parts. More importantly, the incisions were actually stuffed with rags. After pulling out the rags, the internal organs that were squeezed together and stained with mud and sand were revealed. Such precious things were actually treated like this by Rinpoche. Everyone felt stifled and distressed, as if their own sons had been abused. After that, everyone ignored Rinpoche and went to deliver the corpses, leaving only Rinpoche and Yongsen behind. Mr. Ren, what's the level of an earth will expert in that world? Yongsen couldn't help but ask. Although he didn't know what level an earth will expert could reach in that world, he knew from the secret manuals that Rinpoche had given him that the level of an earth will expert in that world wouldn't be very high. After all, he didn't believe that Rinpoche would so easily hand over such good martial arts manuals to them. Their biggest hope now wasn't to obtain better martial arts manuals through Rinpoche, but to find more suitable cultivation methods for humans through the research of these martial arts manuals. Although this wouldn't be a short-term task, with so many elites doing research and the supercomputers doing all kinds of calculations, it should be more efficient than in that world. Everyone was still very confident in the technology on Earth. Furthermore, the techniques that they had researched and modified were more suitable for humans on Earth. However, he still wanted to know what level an Earth will expert was in that world. After all, the strength of an Earth will expert that was simulated by the supercomputers had already far surpassed that of humans. Rinpoche's answer would also allow them to understand a little more about that world. The level of an elite army, Rinpoche replied after thinking for a while. About the same level as the special forces. Rinpoche deliberately concealed one point. In Deo, they were indeed at the level of an elite army, and the big shots in the imperial court were all spirit will experts. However, in Great Xia, an earth will expert was also considered a small expert. They're actually at the level of an elite army. Yongsen was a little surprised. Although he felt that the level of an earth will expert wouldn't be too high, he didn't expect them to be at the level of an elite army. An army made up of earth will experts. This news was indeed very frightening for people on Earth who could only look up to earth will experts at present. More or less. Rinpoche nodded. His words tend to be true. Behind a monitor, someone looked at Rinpoche's expression and concluded. Chapter 388. Sending the corpse to the research institute and obtaining the results he wanted wasn't something that could be achieved in a short period of time. Even if the country mobilized a large amount of manpower and resources, it would be difficult to obtain valuable results within a few years. However, Rinpoche could afford to wait. 10 years, 20 years. It was fine as long as he could get what he wanted. After sitting in Yongsen's office for a while, he returned to his car and opened a file containing the information on the girl named Qi Jiayu that Shenfeng had given him previously. First, he took a look at the half-body photo in the file. She indeed looked very similar to the Empress. If her face was thinner and her eyebrows were thicker, she would look exactly like the Empress. The only thing that was lacking was her temperament. Qi Jiayu, female, 20 years old, well-off family. Her parents were small businessmen, and she had a younger sister and brother. Her phone number, address, and class timetable were all very detailed. In addition to these, the words, changeable personality, were written next to her personality. Rinpoche looked through it carefully, put the file back into the file, and drove to SH University. She should have classes today, and he would be able to take a closer look at her once. He parked his car outside the school, found a place to park, and strolled in through the main gate. No one stopped him. He found the teaching building according to the map and went up to the 3rd floor. When he found the place, classes had just ended. Renbochin found a good spot, leaned against the wall, and watched as a large number of students walked out of the classroom. Soon, he saw Qi Jiayu chatting and laughing with a girl as they walked out. Many boys around them stole glances at her. After all, her appearance was considered outstanding everywhere, and it was normal for her to attract attention. Renbochin squinted his eyes. He felt the urge to kill this girl again. Even his hand subconsciously reached for the handle of the gun at his waist. Kill her. One empress is enough. There is only one empress in both worlds, and there is no need for another person who looks like the empress. Such a thought naturally popped up in his mind. Kill her. Kill her. Kill her. It was as if there was a voice in Renbochin's mind. Could it be that you want to leave someone who looks like your wife to marry another man in this world? Although they are not the same person, they look almost the same. She is the Qi Zixiao of this world. From this point of view, they are the same person, just the same person in a different world. Renbochin's heart was filled with a sudden murderous intent. Many thoughts emerged in his mind, and all of them were telling him to kill this girl immediately. Renbochin placed his hand on the handle of the gun at his waist. He wanted to pull it out a few times, but he restrained himself. His body trembled slightly. If it weren't for the reminders from the students around him, he might not have been able to restrain the killing intent in his heart. Many people also noticed this strange-looking man. He squinted his eyes and gave off an uncomfortable feeling. One of the men, who was walking with his head lowered, raised his head and saw Renbochin. At first, he seemed to recall something, but soon after, his face revealed an extremely angry expression. It was this guy who had made him the laughingstock of the entire school. His name had spread throughout the entire school, and there were always girls who would whisper and point at him when they saw him. It almost made him vomit blood. His university life was almost half over. It's you, it's you. The pitiful boy who had been tricked by Renbochin previously rushed forward angrily and swung his fist at Renbochin's face. Renbochin tilted his head, twisted his body, waist, and buttocks, and dodged the other party's attacks. After being trained by Tong Lan for so long, even though Renbochin was still a rookie in that world, ordinary people on Earth were no longer a threat to him. Everyone saw a boy rushing madly toward a man who was leaning against the wall and swinging his fist at him. Then, they saw that the man was strolling leisurely and easily dodging the other party's attacks. He didn't even take his hands out of his pockets and didn't even look at the other person. So handsome. Many girls' eyes lit up. Renbochin's appearance was still acceptable. He was originally thin and delicate, but after living in the other world for so long, his figure had become much stronger, and his face had become angular. Especially after more than a month of war experience, he looked like he had an imposing aura. Compared to the boy who was swinging his fist at the side, it was obvious who was superior. Not to mention, he didn't make any big movements when dodging the other person's fists and kicks. He was able to easily dodge in a narrow area. Such skills and calmness still made many people interested. The soft exclamations from the side made the unlucky boy even angrier. He had become a clown in the eyes of others. If he had a knife with him, he would have stabbed Renbochin a few times. Renbochin was suddenly attacked and sobered up a lot. Qi Jiayu had already gone down the stairs, and at this moment, the killing intent in his heart began to slowly fade. Renbochin dodged for a long time and gently kicked the unlucky boy's ankle, causing him to immediately fall to the ground. I won't accept you. Just give up on that thought. I already have someone I like. Renbochin said in a pitiful tone. The boy on the ground almost spat out a mouthful of blood. It was like this again. It was like this again. What kind of hatred and resentment did he have? Because of this bastard, he became gay. Then, it was still this bastard who made him a pestering gay. At this moment, he even had the heart to cry. Renbochin conveniently tricked the unlucky boy again and strolled out of the school building, attracting the attention of many girls. Chi Jiayu was nowhere to be found. Renbochin also didn't want to look for her. Just now, he had confirmed that there was indeed a problem. Something was interfering with him. He just didn't know what exactly it was. There should only be metal chains in his head. Was it the metal chains that were interfering with him? But why? And why was it fine when he saw other people, but it was like this when he saw Chi Jiayu? It was somewhat similar to the situation when he first saw the seventh prince. Could it be related to the Empress? Renbochin couldn't figure it out. After returning to the car, he rubbed his head. He was considering whether he should ask the Empress. After staying in a daze for a while, he returned to the villa and ordered a lot of batteries and solar panels online in preparation for picking up the Empress. After another 2 days, he returned to Dayo with the batteries and solar panels. Someone. Renbochin appeared at the place where he had left previously and shouted. Suddenly, a few figures appeared in front of him. How surly? Renbochin first asked. Now that 1 day and 1 night had passed, it should be about time, right? We're still looking for those who escaped. At that time, the great Xia soldiers ran everywhere, and many of them hid. Now, they are scattered and searching, Sure who immediately replied. Bring the things and set off. Renbochin asked someone to tie the things onto the 4-corned cow's back, and the group rushed to Liao City. 3 days later, Renbochin once again returned to the small city where he had stayed for a month. The blood on the city wall had already dried up, telling the story of what had happened here. At least tens of thousands of people had died on this city wall. From afar, the city wall had already turned purplish black. Renbochin went straight to the city commander's residence. After alighting from the 4-corned cow, the city commander had already received the news and came out. Principal Ren. Chapter 389. In fact, he was a little worried that she would look for him after finding out that he wasn't around or that he would return to Lan City. However, apart from eating and sleeping, Renbochin hadn't discovered any other survival skills. As long as she didn't starve to death, she would probably still be sleeping somewhere between Liao City and Lan City a year later. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Soon, he was led to a room in the city commander's residence by someone arranged by the city commander. Sir, she probably doesn't know that you've left. The man who brought him there said with a grin. Renbochin was shocked. It had been half a month since he left, right? She didn't even realize that he had left. These days, she hasn't left the house at all. She's always sleeping. Every day, all she needs to do is leave some food at the door. She probably doesn't even know that the great Xia soldiers outside the city have left. That burly aboriginal also had an embarrassed look on his face. Other than sleeping, there was only eating. Every day, it was just a rhythm of sleeping, sleeping, eating, sleeping, 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 sleeping. Second brother, is that you? Renbochin opened the door with utmost respect. Rays of light shone into the room from behind him. Amidst the light and darkness, even the dust particles floating in the air could be seen. He wasn't mistaken. It was indeed dust. There was even a layer of dust on the ground. As Renbochin pushed the door open, the dust fluttered in the air. Messy footprints could be clearly seen on the ground. They were left behind by Lin Chaola when she went to the door to get food. A humanoid figure was lying on the bed. As he got closer, he could hear it breathing lightly. He stood in front of the bed and saw Lin Chaola sleeping soundly in a tube top and a short skirt. His saliva was dripping down his face. If not for the drool on her face and her sleeping posture, her figure was not bad. Her bra and short skirt revealed a large area of her snow-white skin. Unfortunately, that face full of saliva was really unforgettable to Renbochin. In addition, Renbochin felt that his chest muscles might be more developed than hers. This was a pity. It was so flat that it could be considered a scarce resource even among the Aboriginals. The Aboriginal ladies often practiced martial arts or did manual labor, but they had never seen such a flat surface before. Get up. The sun is shining on your butt. There are no more white rabbit creamy candies. Ah. Why is it gone? Lin Chowla opened her eyes, which were filled with confusion. She first demonstrated to him what it meant to say, "Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing?" Only after a long time did he regain his senses. "Oh. You're here. Why aren't you accompanying His Majesty?" Renbochin's face was full of vigor. "Sure enough, you really don't know when to sleep. Great Xia has retreated." They retreated. "Don't worry about it, just call me when you're leaving." Lin Chowla yawned, and her eyelids started to fight again. She didn't care at all about her beautiful figure being exposed in front of Renbochin. Renbochin continued to look embarrassed. "I have already forgotten about you once. If I didn't think of you, would you still be sleeping here after 3 to 5 years? Or, after 180 years, he would bring his grandson to look at your bones, pointing at you and saying to his grandson, 'Look, this person has slept his whole life, from birth to death, and is still sleeping now. We'll set off tomorrow. Go out and take a bath first. You're stinking.'" Renbochin looked disgusted. "Impossible. It's normal for our race not to take a bath even once in our lifetime." Lin Chowla looked like he was lying to her. "Damn." Renbochin was shocked. "You're not an Aboriginal." "Who said I am?" Lin Chowla asked with her eyes closed. "Call me when you're leaving tomorrow." Renbochin's jaw dropped. He was really shocked. There was actually someone in the Empress's palace who wasn't an Aboriginal. No wonder when he first saw her, he felt that she was more gentle and less heroic than the Aboriginal women he usually saw. No wonder she was so flat. No wonder she could sleep so much. He had always thought that she was sick. Just like on Earth, there were people with narcolepsy who needed to sleep 20 hours a day. He never expected that she wasn't an Aboriginal. "You're not from Great Xia, right?" Renbochin asked. He suspected that there were probably other races in this world besides the normal humans and Aboriginals like the Yun nation of Great Xia. "Of course not," Lin Chowla said with her eyes closed. "Aren't you annoying? Let me sleep a little more." Renbochin grinned. "All right, let this unknown race continue to sleep," he would ask on the way. Although he said this, Renbochin felt like a cat was scratching his heart after leaving Lin Chowla's room. He was really curious about what race she was. After waiting at the city commander's residence for a day, he saw the travel-worn winged cavalry in the afternoon of the second day. They entered the city and went straight to the barracks in the corner of the city to rest. After 2 days of chasing and killing, they felt a little tired. "Are they all settled?" Renbochin asked someone. It was an old acquaintance, Ting Ji. "There might be some who escaped. Sir Li is arranging for people to capture them. Let's set off tomorrow." Renbochin nodded. "Okay." Renbochin strolled around the city before returning to the city commander's residence. He turned on the radio and called, "Your Majesty." "What's the matter?" The Empress's cold voice was heard. "Have you been eating well? Are there any chefs in Tisua Pass?" Renbochin asked. "No." The Empress replied immediately. In the past, it was all those things and she didn't care whether they were delicious or not. However, after getting used to eating food with all kinds of spices, she immediately noticed the difference when she ate those things again. Fortunately, the Empress was used to being poor. Even though the food didn't taste good, she could still swallow it. Have the great Xia soldiers at Tisua Pass retreated? Ren Baqian asked again. They were gone when I woke up this morning. After the great Xia soldiers knew that those two armies weren't coming back, there was no point in staying here any longer. They took advantage of the night to break camp and leave so that the aboriginals wouldn't rush out of the city and kill them. I will set off to fetch your majesty tomorrow. Inside Tisua Pass, the Empress was sitting in her room with one hand supporting her chin and the other hand fiddling with her hair. The radio was on the table in front of her. After hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress used her finger to draw a circle in the air and wrapped her hair around it. She sounded a little happy as she said, "It's time to go back." Following which, she changed the topic and said, "Don't forget about the rainbow cloud that you promised me." She still remembered this matter. "What would you like to eat, Your Majesty?" "I will bring some food for you first." "Hot pot." The Empress immediately replied. She and Rinpoche were thinking of the same place, and they were both craving hot pot. Erguotu, candy, chocolate, xiaolu, popcorn, tomato-flavored potato chips, tomato-flavored seaweed. The Empress continued to give Rinpoche a list. "Your Majesty, I have prepared a house for you that is filled with all kinds of snacks. You can take them when you open your eyes," Rinpoche said. "That's not bad." The Empress immediately beamed with joy after hearing this. "I haven't seen Your Majesty for half a month." "It feels like several years," Rinpoche said softly. "Humph." The Empress wrinkled her nose and snorted softly. "I saw a small flower on the road. It's outstanding and is the king of flowers. I feel that it is the best match for Your Majesty. I have seen that flower before. It's everywhere in the garden." The Empress immediately recalled that Rinpoche took a small white flower that was everywhere in the garden and said that it was the king of flowers. It was very compatible with her and even wrapped it carefully with a piece of cloth. When she saw it, it had already withered. This isn't the same as the previous one. The previous one obviously had the disposition of a king. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared in the garden. However, this flower is more suitable for Your Majesty. I shall wait and see then. The Empress smiled. The two chatted for a while and showered the affection of Shi Qing and the others who were listening to the radio. After switching off the radio, Rinpoche went out to look for flowers in the city commander's residence. He picked one of each and wrapped it in a large cloth. After picking dozens of flowers, he sat on the ground and spread the cloth, revealing all kinds of flowers inside. Chapter 390. The next day, Rinpoche finally got Lin Chaola out of her room. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that she had a sour smell. Looking at her clothes, he couldn't help but ask, "Don't you need to bathe and wash your clothes?" Lin Chaola yawned, went to the well, and poured a bucket of water over her head. Then, she spun on the ground like a spinning top. She was so fast that Rinpoche couldn't see her clearly. It was all a blur. Large droplets of water fell from her body and splashed on Rinpoche's head. The principle was similar to the drying bucket of a washing machine. A bucket of water was like a spinning top that could be shaken dry. Bathing and washing clothes were done in one go. It seemed very high-end. Rinpoche pondered for a long time and felt that she was like a dog shaking its fur after bathing. 2 minutes later, Lin Chaola stopped and sat on the ground with a confused look on her face. "Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Wait for me. I'm feeling a little dizzy." Rinpoche looked embarrassed. Why didn't he realize that Lin Chao was so amusing? He went forward to touch her clothes and found that they were quite dry. Although they were still half wet, they would be completely dry in an hour in Dayo's weather. Who did you learn this from? Ren Baqian asked curiously. She was a genius to be able to come up with such a strange skill. Do I still need to learn? I knew it when I was born. Isn't it awesome? Lin Chao looked up proudly. It's actually instinct. Awesome. Ren Baqian gave her a thumbs up. What was there to be proud of? Ren Baqian felt that she was born in the year of the dog. She was a cat girl and a human girl, but she was most likely a dog girl. It sounded like she was scolding someone. Yesterday, you said that you weren't an aboriginal. What race are you? Ren Baqian finally had the opportunity to ask. I don't know. Lin Chao replied. You don't know. Ren Baqian's voice rose an octave. No one told me. Lin Chao felt wronged. Didn't Librarian Lin tell you? How do you know that you aren't an aboriginal? Ren Baqian was puzzled. I was picked up by Granny. She said that I wasn't an aboriginal, but she didn't know what race I was. It took me 40 years to grow to this size. I'm not even an adult yet. Lin Chao gestured at her chest and said with grievance. It seemed like she knew about the tablet too. But she's actually 40 years old. Ren Baqian was surprised. He really couldn't tell. Furthermore, he was still underage. What race was she? How long is their lifespan? Even though he knew that there were Kirans and Zhao dragons in this world, this was the first time he had seen a creature with a human appearance. Ren Baqian felt like sending her to Earth for research. Then what do you know? Anyway, some things will naturally come to light. Lin Chao couldn't explain it either. Did you become a spirit will expert by sleeping every day? You can increase your strength by sleeping? Ren Baqian finally asked this question that he was very concerned about. He had this suspicion for a very long time. Yeah. I'm still growing, and growing means sleeping. My strength naturally reached that level. Lin Chao felt wronged when she talked about this matter. However, Ren Baqian felt even more wronged. He had to work himself to death to cultivate, while others only needed to sleep. How unfair was this world? Sure enough, there was no such thing as equality. He was equivalent to a child in the countryside. Even if he worked hard all his life, he might not necessarily obtain as much as others when they were born. This was too heart-wrenching. However, have you ever fought with anyone while sleeping every day? Having strength but not knowing how to use it is like a child swinging a sledgehammer. When we go back, I will introduce you to someone who you can spar with every day. You don't have to be afraid of hurting her. She is sturdy and can take a beating. Ren Baqian rolled his eyes and found a sparring partner for Lin Chao. The flat-chested Lolita and the flat-chested Lolita were a perfect match. I don't have time. I'm sleepy. Lin Chao yawned. She was sleepy again after pouring a bucket of water on herself. Besides, I know how to fight. I can do it when I'm sleeping, Lin Chao added. Really? Ren Baqian's eyes widened. She shouldn't be like this even if she had a cheat. He had been trained by the little Lolita to the point where he couldn't even beat a 10-year-old Lolita. You can increase your strength while sleeping, but you can also increase your skills while sleeping. Sure who? Ren Baqian shouted. Sir, I'm here. Sure who hurriedly ran in after a response. Can you control your strength to the earth will level? Why don't you two have a spar? Ren Baqian was determined to see if Lin Chao was an invincible cheat. No, I'm sleepy. Lin Chao was about to fall asleep. 1 pack of White Rabbit creamy candies. 2 packs. Deal. Sir. Sherhu was dumbfounded. What was going on? I will be gentler. Lin Chowla jumped up from the ground. 2 packs of White Rabbit creamy candies had finally lifted her spirits. She will control her strength to the earth will level. You can test her skills. Renbachien took a few steps back and concentrated on seeing how Lin Chowla was doing. Please. Sherhu cupped his fists at Lin Chowla. Lin Chowla lowered her body and instantly stuck close to Sherhu's body. She dodged his punches and kicks, twisted her body into a weird position, and scratched his face with her claws. Renbachien saw Lin Chowla flash, and a few bloody claw marks appeared on Sherhu's face. Foul! Is this the strength of an earth will expert? Renbachien stared. It should be. Lin Chowla looked aggrieved. Is it? Renbachien asked Sherhu since he couldn't see clearly. However, in his opinion, Sherhu wasn't weak. Even if there was a gap, it shouldn't be that big, right? In that instant of exchange, Sherhu only had time to throw 3 punches and kick once, completely hitting nothing but air. I don't know either. Sherhu was at a loss. Lower your strength a little more. Lower it to the earth will level, preferably the intermediate level. Renbachien exhorted. He wanted to see the 2 of them fight at the same level, not to see Lin Chowla instantly kill Sherhu. I'll lower it a little more. Lin Chowla said hesitantly. She also wondered if she had lowered her strength to the earth will level. Begin. Renbachien said again. Lin Chowla dashed directly toward Sherhu. This time, her speed was much slower. At least, Sherhu could see her clearly. She threw a punch at him and lowered her elbow at the same time. With Sherhu's figure, if he wanted to get close to her, he would definitely land an elbow strike under her fist. At the same time, one of her legs bounced up, and when the other party got close, she struck him with her knee. Renbachien recognized this move as one of the moves from the Fist of Death. In fact, there were a few more variations after it. It wasn't complicated, but it was very suitable for use on the battlefield. However, Lin Chowla pressed down on Sherhu's fist with both hands and flipped over him. She didn't forget to give him another claw strike on his face. When he flipped over the stone tiger, he drew a circle with his heel and hooked it backward, kicking the stone tiger's tailbone. Sherhu immediately felt a chill run down his spine, and his whole body froze. It was terrible to be hit in that position. For a moment, he couldn't even move his pinky finger. After Lin Chowla landed on the ground, she jumped up and turned around in one go. She squatted on Sherhu's back and grabbed his neck with both hands. It seemed as if she could tear his neck apart with a little force. Stop! Renbachien hurriedly stopped her. Lin Chowla was only demonstrating. When Renbachien spoke, she had already kicked off Sherhu's back and landed on the wall about 7 to 8 meters away. Renbachien gasped. Lin Chowla's moves were a little brutal. Why did she always like to scratch people's faces? Renbachien looked at the 5 bloody claw marks on both sides of Sherhu's face. He was already disfigured. Fortunately, Sherhu was a little ugly, so it didn't affect him much. If it were a handsome man, wouldn't he fight to the death after being scratched by her? In any case, he was sure that Lin Chowla's fighting strength wasn't low. Although he hadn't seen her fight with a spirit will expert before, she suppressed her strength to the level of an earth will expert and dealt with Sherhu so cleanly. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Renbachien knew that even if he raised his strength to the level of an earth will expert, he definitely wouldn't be a match for these guards who practice martial arts every day. Lin Chowla was indeed using a cheat code. She increased her strength and techniques while she slept. She was definitely a pay-to-win player. Renbachien recalled the time when he played games in the past. He worked himself to the bone to kill monsters and was then crushed by the pay-to-win players. Chapter 391. Renbachien and the winged cavalry weren't the only ones going to Tisuo Pass. Qing Yuan and Hong Luan were also there. After the Empress left, both of them had been waiting here. Now that they were going to pick up the Empress, both of them brought along the Empress's carriage. When Renbachien and the others left the city, many commoners were also walking out of the city. They were going to bury the corpses. The road from the Great Xia barracks to the north was filled with all kinds of corpses. Given the weather in Great Xia, the corpses would start to smell in less than 2 days. It would be fine if there were only a few corpses, but such a large number could easily cause a plague. Therefore, they had to be buried. Furthermore, burying them underground could increase the fertility of the land. If the corpses were not far from the fields, many commoners were willing to bury them there. This would result in a much smaller harvest in the coming year. Renbachien had seen such a scene before. When Wu Xingho died and Great Xia was defeated, many commoners went out of the city in an organized manner the next day to carry the corpses to the fields and bury them. Renbachien looked at them in high spirits and felt that they weren't going to bury the corpses, but to pick up Jinkala. Of course, they could also obtain a lot of benefits by collecting the corpses. After those soldiers were killed, they couldn't take away many weapons. There were still a lot of weapons scattered outside. Even if most of them were spears, they could still be made into small daggers. If they could pick up a few more spears or steel knives and smelt them into thick daggers, they would become family heirlooms. In such a situation, Deo wouldn't take them back. In the past, there hadn't been any invasions. Now that there was enough iron ore production in Mount Damo in the south, the imperial court didn't have the intention to touch these weapons. Half a month ago, apart from the weapons that were collected after the soldiers were killed and transported away by Li Qianqiu, the rest of the scattered weapons were given to the commoners of Liao City. With these weapons, the next time there was a war, these armed commoners would be able to make the enemy eat a pot of steaming hot tea. On Earth, it was important to keep wealth in the hands of the commoners. Now, it was to keep soldiers in the hands of the commoners. The next step was to head north. Along the way, Renbachien saw Lin Chaola tied to the back of a fork-horned cow snoring. After hesitating for a long time, he reluctantly gave up the idea of finding a sparring partner for her. If the little Lolita was scratched by her, Tong Jinye would definitely fight it out with him. A day later, Renbachien and the others could finally see Tisuo Pass in the distant horizon. Renbachien stood on the back of the fork-horned cow and looked through the binoculars. The gate of Tisuo Pass was open, but very few people entered or exited. There were also more soldiers on the city walls than before. Although Great Xia had retreated, Hongwu was still rather vigilant. The group walked for another half a day. When they were still 5 kilometers away from Iron Suo Pass, they could already see the garbage in front of them. Just like the outside of Liao City, before the Great Xia army retreated, they left behind a large amount of garbage. Although Hongwu had already sent people to clean up, it obviously wouldn't be done in a short period of time. Renbachien asked the troops to stop. Sister Qing Yuan and Hong Luan, you should enter the city first. We will leave tomorrow. Everyone looked at him. It would only take an hour to cover the distance of 5 kilometers. They didn't know what he meant. Wait here, Renbachien instructed. Then, he ran to a secluded spot in the woods that he had spotted earlier. He wanted to return to Earth. It was better to leave everyone outside the garbage dump than inside the garbage dump. After returning to the villa on Earth, Renbachien first drove to the city and bought a huge pile of sweets and chocolates. He bought 150 kilograms of all kinds of sweets, sorghum liquor, and hot pot base before returning home. Then, he made a call to order a cotton candy machine and a large amount of colored candy. For the next 2 days, he had nothing to do, so he cooked cotton candy. After 2 days, he became very proficient. During this period, a housekeeper came to clean up the house. It was rare to see the owner of this villa. "Do you want candy?" Renbochin was cooking cotton candy in the living room. When he saw the housekeeper, he opened his mouth and asked, causing the other party to be a little confused. Ordinary people usually just passed him cigarettes, right? Could it be that rich people started to pass him candy? Then, the two housekeepers saw a large pile of cotton candy beside Renbochin. These were the results of Renbochin's cooking over the past 2 days. The two of them didn't know whether to laugh or cry as they took the cotton candy from Renbochin. With regards to Renbochin's behavior, the two of them could only attribute it to his unique hobby. On the 3rd day, Renbochin returned to Dayo with big and small bags of things. After calling Shihu over, he first walked 2 rounds in the forest before finding a tree that was the size that he had envisioned. Furthermore, it was relatively straight. The tree was 3 meters tall and as thick as a bowl. First, he asked someone to chop down the tree, clean up the leaves, and leave all the branches behind. Then, he took the tree through the garbage dump and arrived at Tiesuo Pass. The situation at Tiesuo Pass was much better than that of Liao City. Great Xia mainly surrounded the place but didn't attack. They only launched small-scale attacks every day. Other than Hongwu, who was seriously injured, there weren't too many casualties. Even though the city walls were damaged, they weren't dyed purplish-black by blood like in Liao City. There were no interludes when entering the city. They went straight to a residence in the middle of the city. In general, there were intersections in the middle of the city. After all, there were gates in all directions. However, Tiesuo Pass was different. In the middle of the city was a residence that occupied a large area. All the carriages and pedestrians had to go around it. This was the residence of Hongwu, who had been guarding Tiesuo Pass for decades. Although all the commoners and pedestrians had to take a detour wherever they went, no one complained. This was because this was a border pass, unlike other cities. The reason for placing this residence here was very simple. If the enemy broke through Tiesuo Pass, they would have to go around it. At the same time, it was also to tell everyone that Hongwu was here. Renbochin and everyone got off the 4-corned cow in front of the entrance. Just as they were about to report their identities, they were greeted by a burly man. That burly man first looked at Renbochin and the others suspiciously. Behind Renbochin were the palace guards and winged cavalry warriors, so it was easy for him to recognize them. Then, he suddenly realized something and pointed at Renbochin. "Ah! You are that fellow from before." Renbochin looked up and grinned. This guy was the one who wanted to use a beautiful servant to exchange for a drone and got kicked into the wall by the Empress. "Is Her Majesty here?" The principal of Black Bamboo Academy, Renbochin, requests an audience. "Yes." That burly man scratched his head, turned around, and kicked a bodyguard behind him. "Go and inform her." He jumped down from the stairs, hooked his arm around Renbochin's shoulder, and asked, that flying thing in the sky, do you still have more? How about me?" Although Great Xia mainly launched small-scale attacks these days, there were also 2 surprise attacks. However, the 2 drones took turns to check on the movements of the Great Xia army. Furthermore, the binoculars could be seen from the city. Every move couldn't be hidden from the generals in Tiesuo Pass. As long as there was a slight change in the military strength, it would be immediately detected. He had been eyeing this kind of magical weapon for a long time. Unfortunately, Great General Hongwu also treated it as a treasure and didn't even let him touch it. "Beautiful servant?" Renbochin asked with a mischievous smile. He wondered if the Empress would jump out and give him a kick. Sometimes, the Empress was quite elusive. That burly man looked conflicted and hesitant. Finally, with a wretched look, he whispered, "Leave an address, I will send it to you when the time comes." Whoosh! Bang! Aya! Renbochin was hit in the face by a piece of falling roof tile. On a distant roof, the Empress looked up at the sky. Before anyone realized that she was the one who threw the tile, she flashed back to the courtyard. Just now, when she saw the expressions of those two fellows, she felt like throwing stones at them. Chapter 392. Is my face disfigured? Renbochin pulled Shihu and pointed at his face. He still relied on this face to earn a living. Who would have thought that he would be ambushed at the entrance of Hong Wu's residence after such a huge storm? Hong Wu couldn't tolerate this. If his face was disfigured, he would have to demand an explanation from Hong Wu. Not bad, not bad. Shihu touched the back of his head and giggled. Good my ass. Renbochin touched the cloth that was stuffed into his nostrils. His nose was sore and swollen, and there were bloodstains on his forehead. Sir Ren. What happened to you? Qing Yuan came out and asked in surprise when she saw Renbochin's nose was stuffed with a piece of cloth. His forehead was red, and there were even 2 cuts. I was ambushed. Renbochin felt wronged. Who did he offend? He was actually ambushed by someone. Her Majesty has summoned you. Qing Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. Renbochin stuffed a white rabbit creamy candy into Qing Yuan's hands. This thing was very useful in opening up roads. When he had money, he would definitely buy the white rabbit creamy candy factory. Sure enough, Qing Yuan was beaming with joy. Sir Ren, where should I send it to? That general pulled Renbochin's sleeves and asked sneakily. He still hadn't given up. The palace, Pingle Park. Renbochin replied without turning his head. If you have the ability, send it there. Let's see if the Empress will hang you on top of the city wall and make you into bacon. Renbochin, Shihu, and a few winged cavalry captains followed Qing Yuan through 2 courtyards and arrived in front of a room, leaving behind the conflicted and melancholy general. From the outside, the room wasn't very big, and the decorations were relatively ordinary. Hong Wu had never paid much attention to these things. Renbochin entered the room and saw the Empress sitting at the table. She was using her fingers to poke holes in the 2-inch thick table. He looked around. The room wasn't very big and was about 50 to 60 square meters. To the Empress, this could be considered a humble abode. The furnishings were also very simple. A bow was hung on the wall at the side, and it was the only decoration in this room. There was a very big bed with pink muslin hanging around it, giving the room a little more of a lady's boudoir. Hong Wu must have arranged this after the Empress moved in. In addition, there was that table and the radio station on it. Greetings, Your Majesty. Everyone said in unison. Renbochin then continued to lie through his teeth. Her Majesty has lost some weight. Did I? The Empress looked up at him and touched her cheek. Yes, but he looks even more heroic, Renbochin added. What happened to your face? The Empress asked casually. I was attacked at the entrance, Renbochin complained with an aggrieved look. Oh, sure, who has failed to protect you? You will be fined 1 month's salary. The Empress looked at him and couldn't bear to do so. She casually fined him 1 month's salary. Shihu lowered his head. It's all this official's fault. The Empress cast a sidelong glance at him. Of course, it was his fault. Otherwise, it was her fault. As for the matter of Renbochin being attacked in front of Hong Wu's residence, it was just like that. Where's the rainbow cloud? The Empress tilted her head to the side, seemingly trying to see if the rainbow cloud was outside. When Your Majesty is ready to leave, you will naturally see it. If Your Majesty wants to leave, you should leave on the rainbow cloud. In the future, the commoners of Tiesua Pass will also be able to spread Your Majesty's heroic bearing to the world. The Empress poked her chin with her finger. She was somewhat tempted. Your Majesty, I have brought other gifts. Please allow me to go out and prepare them, Renbochin said. Go and come back quickly. Although the Empress wanted to ask Renbochin some questions, she was also very interested in his gifts. She had been staying in Tiesuo Pass for more than half a month. Apart from recuperating from her injuries, there was nothing else she could do. She had long felt bored. I need some time. Renbochin excused himself and hurriedly left with Shirhu, leaving a few winged cavalry captains to question the Empress. After leaving the room, Renbochin went straight to the entrance of the residence. Just as he left the courtyard, he met Hongwu, who was wearing a green shirt. Greetings, Great General. Renbochin cupped his hands and bowed. Logically speaking, he should have gone to pay his respects. Hongwu glared at Renbochin, who was about to steal the cabbage that he had raised for many years. Without saying a word, he walked past Renbochin. Did I provoke him? Renbochin was suspicious. He was very surprised by Hongwu's attitude. At least when he returned from Great Xia, Hongwu wasn't this bad. He could still occasionally say a few words. I was slapped in the face by someone at his doorstep, and I haven't even looked for him. He is actually so unreasonable. Renbochin said indignantly. Shirhu lowered his head and didn't say a word. Hongwu was the military god of Dao, and Renbochin was his immediate superior. In the future, he would also be a prince consort. No matter what anyone said, he couldn't interrupt. Forget it. It wasn't easy for the old man to be seriously injured. Renbochin shook his head. Hongwu, who had just walked out of the courtyard, suddenly stopped in his tracks and became even angrier. Anybody would be angry when someone else's pig came to steal their cabbage and scolded them. However, it wasn't worth finding trouble with Renbochin over this matter because he had already decided to teach that fellow a lesson. Renbochin brought Shirhu outside and moved his belongings into the courtyard. Then, he dug a hole in the ground and placed the tree on the ground. A few guards hung candies on the tree according to Renbochin's instructions while Renbochin boiled cotton candy. Every time a cotton candy the size of a human head was brewed, he would hang it on the tree. Not long after, the tree, which was originally bare and only had branches, became brightly colored. All kinds of candy wrappers and colorful cotton candy made the tree look gorgeous and colorful. More importantly, the smell of cotton candy drifted very far. Even Qing Yuan and Hong Luan ran out of their rooms to take a look. Their eyes were almost shining. One could imagine the lethality of such a tree with candies and cotton candy on it for girls. Just as Renbochin lowered his head, a figure appeared under the tree and climbed up. Librarian Lin. A few guards under the tree shouted. Renbochin looked up and saw Lin Chaola squatting on a branch that was as thick as a fist. She held a cotton candy in her hand, took a bite, and squinted her eyes. Her other hand was still plucking lollipops from the tree and stuffing them into her bosom. Her movements were so fast that it almost looked like an afterimage. Seeing that her chest size had increased by 3 times, one of the candies that were already hanging on the tree was missing. Come down. Renbochin shouted with his eyes wide open. Lin Chaola blinked her eyes and said, protection fee in advance. Give me this tree and I will protect you for a year. You aren't even as expensive as this tree. Renbochin looked at the piece of candy that was hanging on the tree that was missing and was exasperated. Lin Chaola hesitated and said, 2 years. Renbochin was speechless. Come down, I will give you white rabbit creamy candies. Renbochin looked at the piece of candy missing from the tree and felt distressed. The next second, Lin Chaola's hand was under Renbochin's eyelids. Renbochin grabbed a handful of white rabbit creamy candies from the bag at his waist and gave them to Lin Chaola. In the end, Lin Chaola snatched the cotton candy from Renbochin's hand, ran to the side, and took a bite with each hand. From time to time, she looked up at the tree enviously. Renbochin turned his head and saw the envious look on Lin Chaola's face. His heart softened as he sighed and said, "Let's continue hanging it." Fortunately, he had brought a lot of candies this time, 150 kilograms, which was enough to hang the tree several times. Chapter 393. The people inside the courtyard had heard everything clearly. The Empress tried her best not to look at what Renbochin was doing. She spoke to Hongwu from time to time, and it was obvious that she was somewhat absent-minded. Hongwu sighed when he saw her like this, sat down for a while, and left. When he went out, he saw Renbochin working on the candy tree and snorted. This guy was doing this kind of crooked trick again. He couldn't think of the word sycophant even after thinking about it a few times. However, this was what he was thinking. The Protectorate of the Northeast was still at war with the Yun nation. Although Great Xia had retreated, this matter obviously couldn't be forgotten. Furthermore, the entire north of the nation was in a state of depression. Under such circumstances, as an official, Renbochin didn't think of proper ways to do proper work and instead made these childish things to please the Empress. This made Hongwu very angry. If Renbochin wasn't capable, Hongwu wouldn't be so resentful and would at most look down on him. However, from the variety of things that Renbochin made, he seemed to be quite capable. Hongwu was even more dissatisfied that Renbochin made these things as soon as he arrived. Renbochin squinted at Hongwu while making the cotton candy. "Are you going to bite me? I didn't do anything to you or provoke you. Why are you snorting for no reason?" It took a lot of time to redecorate the tree. The 3-meter-tall tree was covered with layers of colorful cotton candy on the outside and all kinds of candies and chocolates on the inside. From afar, it looked very attractive with red and green colors. Renbochin made 2 more cotton candy and gave them to Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan. The 2 of them looked at him greedily, but the Empress was inside and didn't dare to ask for more. Lin Chaola, on the other hand, was sitting on top of the wall with a lollipop in her mouth. Her eyes were closed, and her head kept nodding down. Within a few minutes, she fell off the wall. She woke up with a start the moment she fell off the wall. When she realized that she was falling off the wall, she curled her body into a ball and did a somersault in the air. Boom! Lin Chaola didn't feel any pain after falling to the ground. Her eyes were wide open, and she was obviously in a daze. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? In less than a minute, her eyes closed again, and her body fell to the side with a gurgling sound coming from her throat. Renbochin turned to look at her and shook his head. This fellow was hopeless. Renbochin entered the house and saw that the Empress was still sitting in front of the table in a daze. He said, "Your Majesty, the gifts are ready. Do you want to place them in the house?" "All right." The Water Empress nodded. Just now, after Hongwu left, she sneaked a peek and was very tempted. Renbochin looked up at the roof, calculated that it was high enough, and said, "Your Majesty, I want to dig a hole in the ground." The Empress did not ask why and continued to nod her head. "All right." Renbochin turned his head and shouted for Shu to come in. In an empty space at the side of the room, he smashed a stone slab on the ground into pieces and instructed someone to dig a hole there. After the pit was dug, Renbochin instructed his men to uproot the tree, plant it in the pit, and fill it with soil. As soon as the tree was brought in, it attracted the Empress's attention. Her eyes followed the tree closely. Especially the sweet smell of the cotton candy, it made her heart itch. "What is this?" the Empress finally asked. "Your Majesty, let me introduce this solemnly. This is the candy forest within the wine pool and fruit forest in heaven." Renbochin pointed at the tree with both hands and introduced it very solemnly. In Dayo, the value of meat wasn't high. People's staple food was meat, so it was very easy to make a meat forest and didn't cost much. Especially for the Empress, the candy forest was the way to go. If the emperor who said, "Why not eat minced meat?" was in Deo, he would definitely not be recorded in the history books. Why not eat meat? Isn't it cheap to eat meat? There's nothing wrong with it. The Empress was extremely excited. This candy tree was very interesting to her and was more to her liking than other gifts. She nodded deeply and asked, "Very much to my liking. But what is a wine pool?" As the name suggests, a pool is filled with wine. People in the pool can open their mouths to drink wine and live a drunken life every day. The Empress thought of that scene and was somewhat tempted. However, how much wine would it take to fill a pool? "I want a wine pool." The Empress's eyes lit up. "When we return to the palace, I will build one for your majesty," Renbachien immediately said. It wasn't troublesome to build a wine pool, but it would take some time. It wasn't something that could be gathered in a day or two. Renbachien took a pair of extra-long scissors from the hands of the bodyguard. There were 2 wooden sticks tied to the handles of the scissors. He stood under the tree for a long time before using the scissors to cut the rope that was tied to a cotton candy stick. This kind of scissors wasn't easy to control and would easily miss. Renbachien quickly grabbed the cotton candy and passed it to the Empress. "Your Majesty, try it. This candy forest needs to be cut to be interesting." Reaching out to pluck something wasn't as fun as cutting it with scissors. It had to be slightly more troublesome to be interesting. It was just like how many people were willing to use the claw machine even though the money from it was enough to buy a doll. This was something that Renbachien suddenly thought of. When he returned, he would find a place to build a claw machine and stuff the dolls with candy. He would give the Empress 100 coins every day and then adjust the probability of the claw machine. The Empress would be able to catch 1 or 2 candy dolls with 100 coins. It would definitely be very interesting. That is, if the Empress didn't smash the claw machine. The Empress took a bite of the cotton candy and nodded her head in satisfaction. With this candy tree, she wouldn't mind even without the rainbow clouds. "Your Majesty, do you want to try?" Renbachien asked as he watched the Empress eat the cotton candy mouthful by mouthful. The Empress took the scissors and immediately discovered a problem. The wooden sticks at the back weren't tied tightly, and the scissors would sway. However, this was a small problem for her. Her hands moved as fast as lightning, and candy began to fall from her head. It was just like picking fruits in the forest. As the candy fell, the Empress seemed very happy and excited like a little girl. Her hands didn't stop moving, and candy fell to the ground in no time. "The harvest is indeed joyous," Renbachien commented. The Empress rolled her eyes, stuffed the scissors into Renbachien's hands, and walked back to the table with her hands behind her back. She walked on tiptoe and looked very happy. Staying at Tiesua Pass for more than half a month was too boring. Now that Renbachien was here, she finally had some fun. The Empress's happiness spread to Renbachien, causing him to smile. He collected the candy on the ground and placed it on the table for the Empress. Then, he instructed the guards to continue hanging candy on the tree. Renbachien walked to the Empress's side, took out the little red flower, and said, "Your Majesty, I saw that this flower is outstanding and has the bearing of an empress. I felt that I should pick it and give it to you." The guards who were hanging the candy at the side looked sideways at the sky, and then at the roof. "A few days ago, when you picked a bunch of flowers at the city commander's residence, they all saw it." The Empress held the half-dried flower in her hand. The color was red, which she liked, but she felt that it looked a little familiar. "This seems to be a flower planted at the city commander's residence in Liao City," the Empress asked doubtfully. This kind of flower didn't exist in Lan City, but she had some impression of it after staying at the city commander's residence for a month. It turns out that this flower has been contaminated with your majesty's aura. No wonder it has the bearing of an empress. Renbachien was full of nonsense. The empress rolled her eyes, looked at him, and said, "You are always by my side. Have you been contaminated with my aura?" "I have been contaminated with your majesty's aura." Renbachien thought for a while and felt that these words sounded like a dog relying on its master's power. "I have been contaminated with your majesty's aura." This sounded like a fox exploiting the tiger's might. Chapter 394. A hot pot was placed on the table in the room. As the temperature of the water rose, the soup in the hot pot began to boil, and the bottom of the pot came out from time to time. Upon seeing this, Renbachien quickly placed the meat and wild vegetables in the pot, and the aroma immediately came out. When they were waiting for the hot pot soup to boil, the three of them stared at each other and didn't have much to say. Now that the soup was boiling, the deadlock was broken. Renbachien, the empress, and Hongwu, who had mastered the art of changing faces. When facing the empress, it was like a gentle breeze, but when looking at Renbachien, it was as cold as ice. The instantaneous change in expression was breathtaking. Even Renbachien wanted to ask Hongwu if he was eating from him or stealing from him. Why did he have such a cold face when he saw me? With such a person present, Renbachien's mood immediately turned sour. The empress had always been cold. If Renbachien didn't speak, she wouldn't either. Hongwu stood there like a light bulb. Now that the hot pot was ready, the atmosphere became more lively as Renbachien started to move. The empress stared at the meat floating in the hot pot and focused all her attention on it. "Your Majesty." Renbachien dipped the meat and placed it on the empress's plate before disappearing in an instant. The empress had been craving food these days. Renbachien poured wine for the empress before pouring wine for himself. "I wish your Majesty prosperity in martial arts." Renbachien raised his cup and toasted. The empress downed the wine in one gulp. As the wine entered her stomach, her eyes became brighter. "I congratulate your Majesty for killing Lu Qi and intimidating Great Xia." Renbachien toasted again. Although Renbachien said it casually, it was the truth. In the past 6 months, the Empress had killed the 5th most powerful expert in the world, Hua Sanlu, the Zhu Mu elders, and Lu Qi, who was originally the 8th most powerful expert in the world but rose to the 7th most powerful expert because of the Empress. The news of the defeat of Great Xia and the loss of 500,000 soldiers spread throughout Great Xia. The Empress's reputation for killing was now deeply rooted in the hearts of Great Xia. Countless warriors and scholars were discussing Dao's Qi Zixiao in the streets, alleys, and taverns. All of them were amazed. One had to know that 3 years ago, because the Empress was young and didn't have many battles with experts, she was ranked among the top 10 in the world. Many people had their doubts. As a result, there were always people challenging the Empress for the next 2 years. Even though none of the challengers survived, the Empress still hadn't fought against a top-notch expert. It was only in the past 6 months that he had shaken the world 3 times in succession. Outside of Dao, his reputation had already overshadowed that of Hongwu, who had guarded the borders for decades. After all, this kind of top-notch expert, and a young woman at that, with peerless beauty, would attract even more attention. Unfortunately, I heard that she raised a gigolo. This 3rd cup. Even though I didn't do anything, I still want to thank myself for the hard work. Renbachien said sincerely after thinking for a while. When Hongwu heard this, his beard stood up and he almost smashed the bowl on Renbachien's face. This guy's shameless demeanor was even worse than that bastard Tongzhenye when he was young. If he had known that this person was like this, he would have risked his life to stop Her Majesty from choosing him as her husband. Upon hearing this, the Empress's eyes curved into crescents. She looked at Rinpochen with her clear eyes and asked, "Do you want me to pour you some wine?" "I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself." Rinpochen chuckled and finished the wine. "I salute the great general for his hard work," the Empress said to Hongwu while fiddling with the wine cup. "Thank you, Your Majesty. This is my duty." Hongwu held the cup with both hands and didn't forget to glare at Rinpochen. In any case, the room was livelier than before. It was much better than before. "Your Majesty, what should we do next?" Rinpochen raised his cup and asked. "What do you mean?" The Empress's eyes flickered as she didn't quite understand what he meant. Great Xia came to fight and retreated in defeat. "What's next?" Rinpochen asked. "The commoners who escaped into the city should return to their villages and reorganize their fields. However, some of the villages have been burned down and the crops for this season have been destroyed. I'm afraid that the people's livelihood will be difficult for the next 2 seasons, so their taxes should be reduced," Hongwu said. This was a major issue in his eyes. The cities that have been destroyed also need to be rebuilt. "What's next?" Rinpochen continued to ask. "Principal Ren, if you have something to say, just say it," Hongwu said. "What I mean is, shouldn't we ask Great Xia for compensation for their defeat?" Rinpochen asked. "Compensation for defeat?" Hongwu and the Empress looked at him. This term had never been used in this world before. Rinpochen saw that they didn't understand and explained, "They can't just come and fight as they please and retreat after losing, right? We have suffered so many casualties, so 100 taels of silver for each man will expert isn't too much, right? Don't they have to compensate for the funeral expenses?" There were at least 100,000 casualties, which would be 10 million taels of silver. Also, the families of those who died and were injured also need to be compensated, right? One had to know that they had lost their loved ones because of Great Xiao's atrocities. Even though money couldn't make up for their psychological trauma, not paying them was absolutely unacceptable. "In addition, Your Majesty, you haven't been eating or sleeping well these days, and you've even lost half a kilogram. This should be compensated, right? Also, we spent a lot of manpower and material resources to build those cities, but they were destroyed by Great Xiao's invasion. This matter must be solved with money. Also, they cut down so many of our trees to attack the cities. It takes 10 years to grow trees, and 100 years to nurture people. How many years will it take for those trees to grow again? We still have to pay for the things we buy, and they have to compensate for the trees that they robbed. Also, they left behind so much rubbish when they retreated. I don't know how much manpower and material resources will be needed to clean up this rubbish. Even though it's inevitable that there will be casualties during a battle, these are all caused by Great Xia. No matter how you look at it, they should be the ones to compensate. This is the compensation, and there's also the compensation for defeat. They can't just fight whenever they want, right? They fought and lost, so they have to compensate." Rinpochen counted with his fingers for the 2 of them. "Finally, they robbed me of 5 million taels of silver. You have to return this to me, right?" Hongwu and the Empress's faces were bright and full of expression. Rinpochen's words were an eye-opener for them as they had never heard of compensation for defeat. "Also, what's with the last 5 million taels of silver? When were you robbed of 5 million taels of silver? How could Xia Bailong possibly agree to these demands?" Hongwu was flabbergasted at first, and then he said coldly, "If he doesn't want to pay, he can just go and get it himself. I heard that they already have 180,000 soldiers at the border. It's difficult to even guard the border. If an army were to enter the hinterland of Great Xia, they wouldn't be able to do anything, right? Their new soldiers can't be trained in a few months. Even if they were to transfer troops from other places, it wouldn't be possible in a short period of time. With this amount of time, we can already do a lot of things. After robbing them, we can spread the word that the Emperor of Great Xia refused to compensate us for our losses and that he was the one who invaded us first. However, he doesn't want to bear the consequences and doesn't care about the civilians in those cities. I'm afraid that it will backfire. Those civilians will still hate us, Hongwu said after thinking seriously. Even though he didn't like Rinpochen, he would temporarily put aside his prejudice when it came to proper business. He was still a little tempted to rob them. After all, no one would be able to take it lying down after being beaten up for no reason. Needless to say, he was a veteran at the border who had been in the army for decades. The human heart is the most unpredictable thing. It's not uncommon for a person to hate his protector because his protector didn't protect him well, causing him to be hurt by others. Rinpochen shook his head. Moreover, they don't necessarily like us now. Hongwu agreed with Rinpochen's last sentence. The problem now is that there's still the Yun nation. Hongwu frowned. At present, the Protectorate of the Northeast was still at war with the Yun nation, and the Protectorate of the North had just ended its war with Great Xia. If they were to start a war with Great Xia now, they would probably fall into a quagmire again. The first batch of 20,000 new soldiers will be ready in 2 months. If it's just the Yun nation, we won't be able to cause much trouble in 2 months. On the other hand, Great Xia is probably licking its wounds and recuperating. Who knows when they will attack us again? In particular, when we are at war with the Yun nation, they are silently sharpening their claws. Instead of this, we might as well give them some trouble first. At least before we deal with the Yun nation, they won't be able to care about us, Rinpochen said. It won't take long to deal with the Yun nation, Hongwu said. He wanted to seek stability and deal with the Yun nation first before dealing with Great Xia. The Yun nation was much easier to deal with than Great Xia. It's easy to repel the Yun nation, but it won't be easy to occupy them in a short period of time, Rinpochen said. Hongwu was shocked to hear this and looked at the Empress. The Empress nodded her head slightly, acknowledging Rinpochen's words. Even though the Yun nation is smaller than Dao, it has a large population and the situation is complicated. If we want to occupy the Yun nation, we will need to maintain a large number of troops. Even though there are advantages to occupying the Yun nation, there are also many disadvantages. Just like in the south, those people are always dishonest. They occupy a large piece of land and even implicate an entire protectorate. Hongwu frowned. He didn't know when the Empress and Rinpochen came up with this idea, but it would be difficult for Dao to annex the Yun nation. If the South and the Yun nation were to join forces, it would probably involve a lot of energy. In his opinion, the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. Regarding this idea, his first reaction was to oppose it. After all, apart from the lack of salt and iron, Dao was still doing well in other aspects. Furthermore, the salt and iron issues had already been resolved. There was no need to take the risk of annexing the Yun nation and spending a lot of energy to govern it. If things went wrong, they might end up in a quagmire. One had to know that the Yun nation wasn't a small country. Its population was even larger than Dao's. At present, Dao couldn't find that many officials that could be used after occupying the Yun nation. However, the Yun nation has what we need the most, Rinpochen summarized. Regardless of whether it was salt, iron, minerals, or population, Dao needed them in all aspects. If Dao wanted to develop quickly, the various products of the Yun nation would be very important. Furthermore, I already have some ideas on how to govern the Yun nation, Rinpochen said. Hongwu glanced at him. He was doubtful of his words. This matter is of great importance. Your Majesty, you have to reconsider. Hongwu cupped his hands. I have made up my mind, the Empress said faintly. After going to Earth, she realized how barren Dao was. Therefore, it was necessary to obtain a land like the Yun nation that was rich in mineral resources. Great General, you don't have to worry too much. When the time comes, we can look at the situation. If things don't work out, we can bring back a lot of resources from the Yun nation, Renbochin added. Hearing this, Hongwu was finally relieved, but his eyebrows were still knitted together. War wasn't child's play. Occupying such a large country and incorporating it into one's territory wasn't child's play either. Chapter 395. Hongwu left with a frown. He still had doubts about swallowing the Yun nation. It wasn't difficult to conquer the Yun nation. The problem was that it would easily drag Dao into a quagmire. Those experts who stayed out of the war wouldn't sit idly by either. If they wanted to stabilize the situation in the Yun nation, they needed a lot of troops. However, there was one thing that he immediately did. The next morning, he sent a letter to Tisua Pass and handed it over to the current commander of Great Xia, Guide General Ziyi. At noon, Ziyi opened the letter that was delivered to him in his residence. He saw that he looked like a chicken that had crawled out of its claw. After carefully reading the letter, he saw that it was a list of compensation that Great Xia had to pay. This included various funeral expenses, expenses for repairing the city walls, compensation for mental damage. Finally, there was the 5 million taels of silver that was robbed by the Juroa city guards. In total, there was a total of 105 million taels of silver, which was the annual income of Great Xiao's treasury. Ziyi was stunned. After reading it carefully, he felt that he had seen wrongly. After reading it 3 times and confirming that he hadn't seen wrongly, he tore the letter into pieces. At the same time, he said coldly, "Could it be that they are crazy?" Then, he ordered, "Chase them out." Compensation. What a joke. There had never been such a thing. In the evening, Hongwu received the report and reported it to the Empress. Just as we expected, the commander of Great Xia has chased the messenger back, Hongwu said. Just as I said before, go and get it yourself, the Empress said faintly. Your Majesty, who should we send? Hongwu asked. One had to know that the winged cavalry wouldn't be enough to transport the goods back to Great Xia. Furthermore, the winged cavalry lacked top-notch experts. The strongest was the winged cavalry's protector general, who was equivalent to a spirit will expert. Let Li Qinqiu go, the Empress said after some thought. With Li Qinqiu's strength, as long as he didn't encounter a top-notch expert, there shouldn't be any problems. The next day, the Empress, Hongwu, and Renbochin circled an area in Hongwu's study. Then, the Empress used the radio to call for Li Qinqiu. 2 days later, Li Qinqiu, who was resting near Liao City, arrived at Ping City with 6,000 soldiers from the Protectorate of the Center. The 3 of them spent the entire afternoon researching in Hongwu's study. The next day, Li Qinqiu led the winged cavalry, 3,000 soldiers, all the 4-corned cows in Ping City that could be used as mounts, and a large number of water buffaloes that could be used as rations. They headed straight for the west and prepared to cross the Lianing mountain range and head toward Great Xia. Along with them were the 1,000 grenades that Renbochin had prepared. This thing would be of great use in the face of the Great Xia military formation. To disrupt the enemy's formation, 1,000 pills were enough for 3 battles. It was more than enough. Both sides had radios that could contact each other at any time. If they wanted to return, Hongwu could send troops to attack Tisua Pass to reinforce them. As for the rest, it all depended on Li Qinqiu. One day after Li Qinqiu left, Renbochin said to the Empress, Your Majesty, it's time for us to return. Li Qinqiu's return trip would take at least a month. The Empress had been away from Lan City for a long time, and it was time for her to return. We'll set off tomorrow. The Empress nodded. After saying this, the Empress glanced at Renbochin again. The meaning behind her words was very clear. Where was the rainbow cloud that he mentioned? Your Majesty, the cloud is still on its way. Why don't we wait for another 3 days? Renbochin hurriedly suggested. Previously, when he came back, he only brought the grenades and some equipment. There was still one extremely important thing that he didn't get. In that case, let's wait for another 3 days, the Empress said indifferently. Although she was already tired of staying in Ping City, there was no harm in waiting for another 3 days. After another day, Renbochin and the Empress returned to Earth together. It had been more than 2 months since the start of the war. More than half a year had passed on Earth. The last time the Empress was here, it was still autumn. Now, it was already the end of spring and the beginning of summer. The weather was just right. The first thing that came into the Empress's sight was an unfamiliar room. It was much bigger than the previous house. On one side, there was a floor-to-ceiling window. Bright and beautiful sunlight shone in through the window. Standing at the Empress's position, she could see the lush greenery outside the window. In the past, there were only tall buildings outside the window, but now, they were gone. Your Majesty, this is our new house, Renbochin said. Oh, the Empress responded faintly. She wasn't interested in this. Your Majesty, follow me. You will definitely like it. Renbochin held the Empress's hand. It was very soft and warm. He hadn't held her hand like this for a long time, and it made him a little excited. After opening the door, there was a very spacious corridor. At the end of the corridor was a table and a pot of flowers. Above it was a window. Diagonally across from Renbochin's room was the room reserved for the Empress. It was 3 times the size of the previous room. There was a huge mirror and a row of wardrobes that barely contained the Empress's clothes. Next to the window was a princess bed. Your Majesty, this is your room. Renbochin introduced. The Empress tilted her head. In the previous house, she and Renbochin had 2 floors. Now, they were diagonally across from each other. I have brought all your clothes over. Renbochin opened the wardrobe and revealed a sea of red. Almost all of them were red dresses. The Empress was a little happy to see these dresses. Although she hadn't worn most of these dresses, women didn't buy clothes just to wear them. Seeing them placed there would make people happy. Next is this. Renbochin opened another door. The room was surrounded by shelves with a dazzling array of snacks. Most of the things that the Empress liked to eat could be found here. In the middle of the room were 3 freezers that were filled with ice cream. Upon seeing this room, the Empress shook off Renbochin's hand and walked in alone. She took out a chocolate cake, opened it, and put it in her mouth. Then, she walked around the room. She had a faint smile on her face. Although she felt that this place was very good and liked it, it didn't make her as happy as the candy tree. Overall, she was still very satisfied. Renbochin leaned against the wall and watched the Empress walk around the room with a smile on his face. Next is the next floor. Renbochin and the Empress went to the first floor. The living room was very big, but they didn't pay much attention to it. Renbochin directly pushed open a door, and what was reflected in the room was a broken light. The room was very big, even bigger than the 2 bedrooms upstairs combined. It was covered with colorful tiles and was filled with a Mediterranean style. In the middle was a swimming pool that was about 100 square meters. The water inside was so clear that the bottom could be seen. Next to the pool were 3 reclining chairs and a side table. Renbochin eagerly introduced, Your Majesty, you can swim here in the future. Just think about it, swimming here, soaking in the cool water while I serve tea and pour wine for His Majesty. It's so fascinating. I've even prepared a swimsuit for His Majesty. Do you want to give it a try? You seem to want me to give it a try. The Empress turned to look at him. Chapter 396. Your Majesty, there are no outsiders here. It will be cool to soak in the water. The Empress looked at him, stretched out her hand, and sent him flying into the pool. I don't feel hot in this weather. You should go down by yourself, the Empress said faintly and went upstairs to change her clothes. She was well aware of Renbachian's intentions. It wasn't like she hadn't been to the seaside before, but she didn't really care and was just a little shy. Plop! Renbachian began to panic when he fell into the water. He didn't know how to swim. Gulp gulp gulp. He gulped down large mouthfuls of water and finally stabilized himself. When he stood up, he realized that the water was only slightly above his chest. After all, the depth of this pool was only about 1.4 meters. After climbing out of the pool, Renbachian lay on the edge of the pool and spat out water like a fountain. He was finally alive. He thought that he would have to learn how to swim sooner or later. It would be a tragedy if a dignified man well expert like him drowned in a pool that was 1.4 meters deep. He took a towel from the side and wiped his head before returning to his room to change his clothes. When he came out, he heard the sound of the television downstairs. When he went downstairs, he found the Empress curled up on the sofa eating ice cream. Do you want to go out for a walk? Renbachian asked as he sat beside her. You have worked hard these days. Okay. The Empress nodded cheerfully. These days in Ping City were really boring, and it was good to go out for a walk. As he drove down the mountain, Renbachian casually talked about what happened a few days ago and said, there seems to be something disturbing me in my mind. I always want to kill that person. Also, all kinds of thoughts come out. I don't know if there is a problem with the metal chain or something else affecting me. Renbachian didn't say that Qi Jiayu looked exactly like the Empress. He just wanted to hear her opinion. Although the Aboriginals didn't cultivate their minds, the Empress was more or less able to understand them with her strength. The metal chain emerged from Renbachian's head. Did someone shout at it just now? The Empress grabbed the metal chain that had just emerged from Renbachian's head and tried to twist it into an S shape. She carefully sensed it and said doubtfully, this thing shouldn't affect you. Furthermore, there's nothing else in your soul see other than this metal chain. The Empress fiddled with the metal chain in her hand and twirled it around her palm a few times. The metal chain couldn't escape even if it wanted to. It turns out that Your Majesty is also proficient in this area. After hearing what the Empress said, Renbachian felt that she seemed to know more than he thought. I don't know much about it, but there's a sliver of my soul in your body. If something happens, I will be able to sense it, the Empress said faintly. Upon hearing this, Renbachian subconsciously stepped on the accelerator. The car behind him almost hit Renbachian, and the driver of the car was so angry that he pressed on the horn and cursed loudly. Part of my body. Renbachian was dumbfounded. At that time, I thought that if you let me down, you would not be able to escape death no matter where you went, the Empress said faintly. If you didn't betray me and were killed by someone else, this wisp of soul will be able to wrap around that person's body. I will be able to find him and kill him no matter where he goes. Renbachian widened his eyes. Damn, when did this happen? He had such a dangerous thing on him. Usually, it doesn't affect you. I did it a long time ago. The Empress turned her head and didn't look at him. Renbachian opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. Could it be that the Empress was afraid that he would run away in the past? Otherwise, why would she do this? If he was in Lan City, the Empress could kill him with one finger. Why would I let you down? Renbachian said softly. Being able to know you was arranged by God. God is the most powerful. Moreover, you are the only treasure in the world. To be able to be with you, I have nothing else to ask for in this life. The Empress's ears felt warm and she was elated. Her fingers subconsciously poked and poked at the car door. From the outside, one could only see the door being poked open like a piece of paper. Then, another finger poked out. The driver of the car beside them was stunned. Renbochin continued to drive forward and asked, "Is it easy to split your soul? Doesn't it affect you?" "It's very painful," the Empress said faintly. For her to say that it was painful, it was indeed very painful. It was as if she was being torn apart. However, she didn't expect it to be so painful. Otherwise, she probably would have hesitated. This was a secret technique passed down in the Aboriginal tribes. Only the supreme geniuses could do it, but it could only be done once. Only when one reached longevity heaven could they separate their soul for the second time. However, every time they split their soul, they would experience the pain of their body being torn apart. As a result, very few people use this technique. At this point, Renbochin already knew why he wanted to kill Qi Jiayu when he saw her. As for why he had those thoughts, it was probably because he was affected by that split soul. It was just like when he saw the seventh prince. When this split soul saw Qi Jiayu, it also had the same reaction. According to what he thought, this was, after all, a split soul and was different from the real person. Therefore, when the killing intent arose, it also evoked all kinds of thoughts. Renbochin didn't mention this matter again. He really liked the Empress. Having such a woman to spend a lifetime with was really enough for him. At this point, he knew that he wouldn't do anything to let the Empress down and naturally didn't care about this split soul. Can you sense what the split soul sees? Renbochin suddenly remembered something. I can't. Since this split soul has been separated, I can only sense its location at most. Oh. Renbochin heaved a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as he could retain his privacy. What if he went to a spa in the future? If the Empress peeped at him from the side, he would probably be hung on the city wall and turned into bacon when he returned. As for the matter with Qi Jiayu, he put it aside as he hadn't decided what to do. Although he knew that he was affected by the split soul of the Empress, the influence was already there. That kind of thought had appeared in his mind and left a trace. Therefore, he was still somewhat concerned about Qi Jiayu. However, this matter would be considered later. For the next 2 days, the two of them had nothing to do and strolled around Shanghai, looking at the dresses and shoes in the various shops. For the Empress, buying dresses had always been her hobby. 3 days later, the two of them returned to Dao with a pile of white boxes. The next day, early in the morning, the sky was still bright. The road from the entrance of Hong Wu's residence all the way to Ping City's southern gate was covered in layers of white fog. Walking on it was like walking on clouds. It was a road that was covered with mist. Everyone who woke up early and saw this scene was surprised. They didn't know what was going on, but both sides of the road were blocked by people who didn't allow anyone to walk on it. Some people tried to fish at the edge of the road, but they couldn't find anything. The dense mist on the ground didn't have any shape at all. After taking a closer look, they noticed that there were a few burly men on both sides of the road who were holding a strange object. The mist was coming from the front of this strange object. As the strange object emitted colorful rays of light, the mist became colorful as well. Only this rainbow mist road is worthy of your majesty. Renbochin stood in front of Hong Wu's residence, bowed slightly, and pointed his arm outside. At this moment, looking from the inside, the ground outside was covered with a layer of colorful clouds. The mist slowly rose and dissipated, making it look like a fairyland. The Empress's eyes lit up as she looked at everything outside. Although she had thought about what the rainbow clouds that Renbochin mentioned looked like, she didn't expect it to be like this. It was like a road paved with clouds. There wasn't a woman who wouldn't be affected by such a scene. It was a huge surprise. Renbaqian took a step forward, held the Empress's fingertips, and led her out. When they stepped into the mist, they could feel that the temperature here was much colder than other places. However, it felt more real than not feeling anything. Renbaqian led the Empress on this mist road, and the two of them walked toward the south gate. After the two of them left, the people at the back turned off the smoke mechanism. The mist on the ground soon began to dissipate, revealing the flagstone road below. From afar, it looked like a road made of clouds was prepared for the two of them. As the two of them moved forward, the mist behind them began to dissipate, and the road shortened. Quickly come out and see the deities. What deities? Where are the deities? Many people who were affected by the noise outside opened their windows and looked out. When they saw the road paved with mist and the two people on it, they were immediately speechless. Along the way, the Water Empress's eyes were sparkling and filled with surprise. She also had a smile on her face. When she walked to the city gate and looked back, the mist behind her had already begun to dissipate. Hongwu and the others were also rushing over. Renbaqian leaned his head over and gently pecked the Empress's red lips. The Empress's eyes sparkled as she looked straight at him. There was something surging in her eyes. It was rare that she didn't dodge. The soft touch and faint sweetness made Renbaqian's heart ripple. It was a pity that the time and place weren't right. Otherwise, Renbaqian would really like to continue like this. At the city gate, a man and a woman were kissing in the mist, and they immediately pulled back. The surrounding guards all received tons of damage and looked up at the sky. Chapter 397. Wu Xingho is dead. Great Xia has retreated. Outside Sanchi City, in a huge tent in the Yun Nation's military camp, a middle-aged man cried out after reading the contents of the letter in his hand. This man was the commander of the Yun Nation's Western Army, Zhu Wuzhen. The Yun Nation only received the news half a month after Great Xia retreated. When Wu Xingho died, the Yun Nation didn't receive the news yet. However, Great Xia's retreat couldn't be kept a secret. Zhu Wuzhen's expression was uncertain. Now that Great Xia had retreated, it would be troublesome for the Yun Nation to send out their troops. If the Yun Nation was of one mind and deployed their elite soldiers, Dao would still stand a chance against them given the current situation. However, those people in the imperial court made him feel a chill just thinking about it. Without the skin, where would the hair attach to? They understood this simple logic. However, to them, internal strife and their own calculations were obviously more important than external threats. Previously, it was still alright when Great Xia distracted Dao. Now that Great Xia was gone, he also had the idea of retreating. Then, he saw the second letter, and his expression changed drastically. First, he was enraged, and he slammed his palm on the table. A palm-shaped hole appeared on the table, and the place where his palm had been had turned into wood dust. After a while, his anger dissipated, and he smiled bitterly. In such a situation, they actually told him that they couldn't retreat. Wasn't this clearly making Great Xia a scapegoat? He wondered which official in the imperial court had received a lot of money from Great Xia to make such a decision. Did they really think that without Great Xia, the 180,000 soldiers from the Western Army and those miscellaneous soldiers could stop Dao? What a joke. His only hope was that the Qin nation would send out their troops as soon as possible. Renbaqian and the Empress had just arrived in Liao City when it started to rain. It continued to rain for 3 days. During these 3 days, Renbaqian and the Empress sat in the room, each holding a small wine glass and staring blankly. Is the rainy season here? Renbaqian asked while playing with the wine glass in his hand. Almost, the Empress replied casually. According to the seasons, it would be the rainy season from now until September, and the rest of the time would be the dry season. There were no 4 seasons. In Dayo, there were only 2 seasons, the rainy season and the dry season. Liao City was located in the north, so the rainy season came slightly later. Renbaqian looked at the drizzle outside the window and racked his brains to come up with a poem. During the yellow plum blossom season, every house is raining. Not bad. The water empress said calmly. She didn't know much about poetry, but it sounded pretty good. There are better ones. Renbaqian immediately laughed. Tell me about it. The Empress became interested. Heavy rain, you are full of water. A fine horse with 4 legs. Sea swallows. Renbaqian's voice was full of emotion. Paw. With a flick of her chopsticks, a piece of meat on the plate landed on Renbaqian's face. Thank you for the reward, Your Majesty. Renbaqian chuckled, stuffed the piece of meat into his mouth, and wiped his face with a rag. The Empress ignored him, drank a glass of wine, and threw a piece of chocolate into her mouth. Using chocolate to go with wine was quite creative. However, Renbaqian recalled a type of wine chocolate that he had eaten when he was young. He reckoned that the Empress would like it very much. After staying in Liao City for 3 days, the weather finally cleared up, and everyone set off again. It had just rained, and the dirt road was uneven, so they couldn't speed up. Moreover, they encountered heavy rain after just 1 day of walking. Renbaqian sneaked into the Empress's carriage to avoid being drenched. In fact, there were 2 other ox carts carrying food and daily necessities, as well as Lin Chaola, who hadn't woken up since she boarded the carriage. However, the important thing wasn't which carriage, but who was in it. While listening to the sound of raindrops hitting the carriage, Renbaqian resumed his old hobby and told the Empress a story called A Chinese Ghost Story. The story began with a heavy rain. Ning Kaichen, who was on his way to Guobei County to collect debts, encountered a rainstorm and hid in the legendary Lanrua Temple. Ning Kaichen. I seem to have heard of him somewhere. The name sounded familiar to the Empress. He was there during your birthday celebration. Later on, he came again to deliver a person. Oh. I remember now. It's him. Continue. The Empress thought that the story happened to Ning Kaichen and didn't think much about it. It's just the same name. He didn't experience it personally. Renbaqian pointed it out. Otherwise, when Yan Qixia, Granny Tree Demon, Old Demon Black Mountain, and the others appeared, the Empress would be confused. Next, everyone walked in the mud while Renbaqian told the Empress about strange stories from a Chinese studio. Sometimes, the wheels of the ox cart got stuck in the mud, but a guard could lift it out with a lift. This didn't delay the journey. However, the speed of the journey was inevitably reduced. It's hard to walk. Renbaqian, who had just finished telling the painted skin, sighed in the carriage. This journey was indeed difficult. It wasn't the rainy season when they came, so it wasn't that troublesome to walk. However, on their way back, this kind of road was simply torture. Every step they took was filled with mud. The guards outside were like mud balls. Can that kind of cement be used to repair roads? The Empress asked as she looked at the muddy road outside. If you want to get rich, you have to repair roads first. It's time to repair roads first. Cement will do, Renbaqian said as he looked at the road outside. That's good. Fortunately, Great Xia didn't attack at this time. Otherwise, our marching speed would be greatly reduced. Renbaqian smiled. Great Xia's bowstrings can't be used during the rainy season, the Empress explained. Only then did Renbaqian realize that the bowstrings were mainly made of animal tendons and would become soft after being soaked in water. Even if they weren't blistered, the bowstrings would become soft after using them for a while in such a humid environment. It seemed like Great Xia had deliberately attacked a while ago. However, repairing roads requires a lot of manpower and material resources. Next, it will depend on the Protectorate of the Northeast, Renbachin said after thinking for a while. There were no machines or cars in this world. Everything depended on manpower. Transportation also depended on fork-horned cows and humans. The amount of labor needed to repair the road was huge. In ancient times, people on Earth used laborers. Dayo didn't have laborers, so they had to think of a way to solve the labor problem. It was impossible to hire laborers as Dayo's imperial court couldn't afford it. Also, there weren't that many aboriginals to do this. Therefore, they decided to target the Yun nation. When the time comes, I will tell Zedonglai to capture more people alive. The Empress nodded. In any case, they have 400,000 soldiers, Renbachin reminded the Empress. The 400,000 soldiers of the Yun nation can't even compare to the 200,000 soldiers of Great Xia. If there's anything worth praising, it's that the Yun nation's military equipment is pretty good. However, no matter how good the military equipment is, it still needs people to use it, the Empress said softly. According to the schedule, those new soldiers still need another 2 months, but I will let them set off in another month. Now that Great Xia was crippled, these 20,000 new soldiers could be transferred to the Protectorate of the Northeast. After that, there would be another batch of 20,000 new soldiers who would be trained and transferred to the Protectorate of the North. At present, the 180,000 soldiers of Great Xia wouldn't be able to cause too much trouble in a short period of time. It's all thanks to those things of yours. The Empress glanced at Renbachin. If it weren't for those mortars, grenades, binoculars, walkie-talkies, and radios, Great Xia might have been able to win this war. The mortars and grenades could disrupt the enemy's formation. The binoculars and drones could monitor the enemy's situation at any time. Any movement of the enemy's troops could be detected. The walkie-talkies and radios were even more useful. The various armies could directly communicate with each other and be informed of the situation. Orders were transmitted in real time, and the movements of various units in battle were more timely and accurate. It could be said that the walkie-talkies, radios, binoculars, and drones didn't seem as intuitive as the mortars and grenades, but in reality, they were no less effective than the mortars and grenades. After traveling on the muddy road for 20 days, this group of people finally saw Lon City in the distance. We are finally back. Renbachin alighted from the carriage, stretched his back, and then climbed onto his fork-horned cow. After traveling for so long, he started to miss his students. Now that spring break was over, he didn't know how many idiots would be shot because they couldn't hand in their homework. Chapter 398. The welcome for the Empress this time was much grander than the previous one. After all, it only took slightly more than a month for them to repel Great Xia's attack. All the residents of Lon City were full of pride. This was their Empress. Therefore, when they found out that the Empress had returned, they scrambled to see the Empress with their own eyes. From the city gate to Beihong district, there was a sea of people on both sides. Although it was drizzling, it couldn't stop the enthusiasm of the residents of Lon City. Your Majesty! It's Her Majesty! Your Majesty's martial arts are prosperous. All kinds of cheers came from the crowd on both sides. The curtain in front of the Empress's carriage was pulled open, allowing people to see the Empress in red lying on her side. Just like the first time Renbachin saw the Empress, she was lying on her side on a thick fur without a smile. Her eyes were gently closed while Hong Yuan and Qing Yuan followed behind her. Although she wasn't sitting in a very dignified manner, this image was in line with the people's impression of the Empress. Renbachin obediently followed behind on his fork-horned cow, and it was inevitable that people would point at him. Due to the existence of the radio station, the situation in the north could be transmitted to Lon City every day. Then, it was spread to the residences of the officials, and then to the ears of many commoners. Every day, before and after tea, on the streets and in the alleys, all of Lawn City was discussing the war in the north. Many things that happened during the war were also spread. As a result, although Rinpoche was still a pretty boy, many people heard that he had done a lot of things during the war with Great Xia. This caused many people to look at him differently. At least he wasn't like a fresh flower stuck in a mosaic. He had almost improved to the point of a fresh flower stuck in cow dung. This progress was gratifying. Rinpoche turned his head to the side and happened to see a few heads squeezed in front of a window. They were all his students. Rinpoche smiled at them, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Yagüe saw us. Those students subconsciously shrank their heads back. Du Lao Lu, have you finished your homework? What's there to be afraid of? Since Her Majesty has returned from such a great victory, she will definitely hold a banquet in the palace and have other things to deal with. Yagüe definitely won't start school so soon and will have time to do it. Du Lao Lu patted his chest and said in an imposing manner before turning to look at the others. What about you? I haven't done it yet. Several students were like Du Lao Lu. During the war in the north, they had been talking about the war in the tavern every day and exchanging information they had heard from their parents. How could they be in the mood to do their homework? Du Lalio's gaze drifted over everyone, feeling somewhat disappointed. Although he said it straightforwardly, even if school started a few days later, he wouldn't be able to finish his homework even if he stayed at home every day. At that time, he would probably be shot again. Out of all the students, he had been shot the most. Although the wounds would heal after applying the black mud ointment, there were still patches of tender skin that were different from before. Now, he didn't even dare to bare his upper body. After taking off his clothes, his arms and shoulders were covered with finger-sized white spots. Those who didn't know better would think that he had a skin disease. I've done most of it, someone finally said. Everyone's eyes were on that person. Brother, whether we live or die is up to you, Du Lao Lu said as he hooked his arm around his brother's neck. A bunch of trash. A little loli walked down from upstairs with a look of disdain. Have you finished your homework? Everyone's eyes lit up. Humph. The little loli proudly raised her head and walked down the stairs, ignoring everyone's envious gazes. After leaving the tavern, she drooped her head and went straight to the Tong residence. After returning home, she was in a mess. Then, she gritted her teeth and started to do her homework. When Rinpoche returned to Pingle Park, he immediately saw two black and white round fellows. One of them was lying on the ground while the other was stepping on it and climbing up a tree. Almost a year had passed, and the two little fellows had grown up quite a bit. Rinpoche walked over, and the two little fellows looked at him. Then, Rinpoche dragged the panda on the bottom out, and the one on top couldn't stand anymore and immediately fell down. Rinpoche laughed heartily, hugged the furry panda, and rubbed his face against it. It had a familiar smell. The other panda rolled on the ground, ran over with its mouth open, and tried to push him away. In the end, it was gently pushed by Rinpoche, causing it to tumble and cry out in grievance. Rinpoche rubbed the two pandas, returned to the house, and looked around. There wasn't much dust. It seemed like someone had been cleaning the house after he left. Then, he fell onto the bed. He was finally home and could finally sleep on the bed. Long-distance travel in this world was simply too troublesome. When Rinpoche was woken up, it was almost dark. He stretched and felt much more comfortable. Sir, Her Majesty wants you to attend the banquet in a while, Sherhu reported. Everyone in the imperial court is going. Yes. Rinpoche thought about it. It seemed like he only had his previous robe. Her Majesty asked someone to rush out a new robe for you. I reckon it will be delivered soon, Sherhu said. Get someone to boil the water. I'll take a bath first. After he was done bathing, the robe was delivered. With his current official position, his robe was purple with beautiful embroidery of birds and beasts. It looked much better than his previous robe. The last time he attended the banquet, Renbachin sat at the end. If not for the Empress's special permission, he wouldn't have been qualified to attend. This time, his seat was slightly higher in the middle. He sat together with Feng Ho and a few officials from the Ministry of Works. Below him were Feng Ho from the Department of Ordnance and Gui Hong from the Department of Agriculture and Livestock. Above him were the 6 ministers, the Great Elder, and the Young Elder. Renbachin received a lot of attention the moment he came in. There were also a few people who greeted him, and they were all officials from the Ministry of Works whom he had dealt with before. As for the other ministries, the Ministry of War treated him rather kindly. Other people didn't know what effect the things that Renbachin had on the front line had, but the people from the Ministry of War were very clear about it. Furthermore, his idea of a militia had satisfied the people from the Ministry of War. As a result, they showed their goodwill when they saw him. For example, sneering at him. If he didn't know better, he would have thought that they were going to beat him up. "Sir Ren, you have worked hard on this trip." Just as Renbachin sat down, Feng Ho came in and sat beside him with a smile. "To serve the people." Renbachin was very polite. "Feng Ho, what the hell was this? How's the blast furnace?" Renbachin asked. "It's still under construction. There's been a lot of rain these days, so the construction has slowed down quite a bit," Feng Ho said. The rainy season came earlier in Lon City, and it had been raining continuously these days. Even the speed at which the cement was fired had been slowed down. As a result, by the time Renbachin returned, the progress of the blast furnace was only half done. Now that he had achieved hydraulic hammer forging, it was much easier, and the speed at which he forged weapons was much faster. But the blast furnaces were only half built, and now the iron was not enough to keep up. Renbachin chatted with Feng Ho for a while before the 6 ministers came in one after another. Following them were the Great Elder and the Second Elder. After everyone was seated, the Empress walked into the hall. "We welcome your Majesty and congratulate your Majesty on your triumphant return." Everyone stood up and bowed. "Have a seat," the Empress said faintly and sat down at the seat of honor. She then said, "Today, we're not going to talk about national affairs. We're just here to celebrate. Dance." As soon as the Empress finished speaking, 6 strong men and 6 women entered the hall. The men were wearing leather shorts while the women were wearing tube tops and leather skirts. As the fast-paced drums sounded, the 12 people began to dance a primitive dance in the hall. Many of their movements were similar to hunting, and their mouths were full of energy. Ha! Ha! Their voices were full of wildness. Following that, the sound of Ansun was heard, adding a touch of desolation to the wildness. It was as if they were in the endless wilderness. This is a celebratory dance. In the past, when we were in the village, we would dance this kind of dance if we hunted a lot or defeated an enemy, Feng Ho explained in a low voice. He knew that Renbachin didn't understand this dance. Renbachin nodded. This kind of primitive dance was interesting and full of vitality. As the dance ended, a few middle-aged women played instruments that looked like pipes. The atmosphere in the hall immediately became cheerful. Starting from the Great Elder, the ministers also began to toast the Empress. The hall was full of joy and harmony. Until 1 hour later, following that, a loud shout was heard, "Ignorant Tong, what did you say? Do you want to have a taste of the sharpness of my saber? Come, come, come. Today, I will teach you a lesson." Following that, Tong Jingye's voice was heard. Following that, there was a series of banging sounds. Tong Jingye and Qin Chuan directly flipped the table and jumped to the center of the hall. Tong Jingye used, "Black Tiger Steals Heart," Qin Chuan used, "Monkey Steals Peach," Tong Jingye used, Black Tiger Steals Heart, Qin Chuan used, Black Tiger Steals Heart, and I used, Black Tiger Steals Heart, 3 times in a row. Qin Chuan used, Fishing the Moon from the Bottom of the Sea, 4 times in a row, 5 times in a row. There were even people at the side who were cheering loudly. Lord Tong's attack came at just the right time. It interrupted Lord Qin's accumulation of power and forced him to defend. Lord Qin fell into a disadvantageous position after losing one move. Lord Tong attacked again at this moment, forcing Lord Qin to retreat. Feng Ho evaluated from the side. His voice wasn't soft either. Ren Baqian was embarrassed. How could you see so much about Tong Jingye's Black Tiger Steals Heart 13 times in a row? Feng Ho, you're spouting nonsense. Someone at the opposite table immediately shouted out. Following that, plates and cups flew toward Feng Ho. Ren Baqian looked at the situation and quickly crawled to the side. He then heard a series of crashing sounds behind him. By the time he crawled behind a pillar, Feng Ho had already started fighting with a burly man from the Ministry of War. Then, plates and bowls started flying on both sides of the hall. Ren Baqian stretched out his hand and caught a pork knuckle in the air. When he took a closer look, he didn't know who had taken 2 big bites. After thinking for a while, he threw the pork knuckle away. Sir Ren, sit here. Shi Qing, who was not far away, waved at him. Ren Baqian only took 2 steps before he stopped. He saw a huge figure flying toward Shi Qing, knocking him and the table to the ground. Tong Jingye got up from the ground, picked Shi Qing up, and put him on the ground. He looked around, and his eyes lit up. He picked up the table that Shi Qing had knocked over and threw it at Qin Chuan. Seeing this, Ren Baqian felt that it was better for him to stay here. He turned to look at the Empress, only to see her sitting at the seat of honor and drinking by herself as if she didn't see anything. The people below were in such a mess, but the Empress was still so calm. Chapter 399. The capital of the Yun nation, Wangjing, was said to have been established by a demoted prince of Great Xia in the previous dynasty. At that time, the location of the Yun nation was a desolate and uninhabited land. It wasn't until a long time later that all kinds of sinners, peasants who fled from famine, and all kinds of talents formed a nation in that area, and Wangjing became the imperial capital. After that, the people of that nation merged with the aboriginals in the south and established the predecessor of the Qin nation. The original Han nation was established by an army and aboriginals who fled from the previous dynasty. Later, Great Xia replaced the previous dynasty, and the Yun nation also killed all the royal family of the previous dynasty. The aboriginals overthrew the Han nation. This change of dynasty finally resulted in the current situation. Wangjing was considered a super city in this era with a population of over 1 million. Merchants from all over the world gathered here. Even some merchants from Great Xia said that compared to the imperial capital of Great Xia, Wangjing was more likable. At least it wasn't as dull. Wangjing was most famous for its flower boats on the Sanhua River. Hundreds of giant boats on the vast river were brightly lit throughout the night. Music and laughter reached the shore. Every place was a money-squandering den. Next was the east of the city. Almost half of the city was filled with all kinds of shops. Merchants from all over the world came and went, and there were even people from the sea who came to purchase goods. Prosperous, befuddled, and indulging in a life of luxury, this was the evaluation given by everyone who visited Wangjing. There was even a story about the son of an island owner who didn't want to go back after coming to Wangjing. He even gave up his position as the island owner just to live a carefree life. This was widely spread in the Yun nation and made the people of Wangjing feel proud. There was also the envoy from the Qin nation who didn't change for decades. The emperor of the Qin nation once asked him if he wanted to return home, but he replied, "I'm willing to stay here for the rest of my life." From these two incidents, one could get a general idea of Wangjing. It was a place where people were truly addicted to. However, the atmosphere in Wangjing had somewhat changed these days. Even the lingering music from the musical instruments that sounded like lovers' whispers had lessened. Instead, there were more drum sounds and three-string zither sounds. There was a lot more murderous intent in the air. Those young masters who were jealous of each other in the past were no longer talking about romance. Instead, they were talking about military affairs. The Yun nation's attack on Dayo this time was considered by the people of the Yun nation as revenge. They wanted to avenge the country that was almost destroyed decades ago. Although these young people had not experienced that scene, they all felt that it was a disgrace. Now that they had mobilized their troops to attack, it was time for them to show their country's might and take revenge. All of them were in high spirits as they discussed when they could break into Dayo. A blind musician on a fancy boat shook his head. He did not understand the national affairs, but he knew that these young masters were underestimating Dayo. He didn't know much about Dayo, but he had lived for a long time. At that time, he wasn't blind yet and had seen with his own eyes how terrifying those barbarians were. Not only on the boats, but also on the streets and alleys, as well as among the traveling merchants, many of them were discussing the war. The Yun nation had been peaceful for too long. This time, they sent troops to attack that enemy that almost destroyed the Yun nation. Most people in Wangjing were focused on this war. There were also people who were keenly aware of the undercurrent surging in the Yun nation. Or it could be said that someone had already sensed it a year ago, or even longer. As a result, a few people from the Zhang family went to Lan City to look for an opportunity to get in touch with Dayo. Unfortunately, the Aboriginals still strongly discriminated against foreigners. Although an outsider was chosen by the Empress as a husband, they still couldn't find any opportunities. They brought gifts to all the residences in the imperial court, but were met with disdain and rejection. Most of them were chased out by the gatekeepers before they even saw the owner of the gifts. The ordinary people in Wangjing only knew that there was a war against Dayo, and everyone was looking forward to the news of victory. What they didn't know was that recently, the Western City Army had sent 7 memorials at top speed. 3 of them stated the severity of the situation and suggested a retreat, but they were all suppressed. The last 4 memorials asked for money, food, manpower, and ordnance. The first 3 memorials were about Zhu Wuzhen doing his best. The last 4 memorials were about knowing that the imperial court had already made a decision and thinking of ways to increase their odds of success. Moving the North Army to the west. Now that he has 400,000 soldiers, isn't that enough? There are also the newly developed box crossbows. Against 15,000 barbarians, he still needs manpower. More than one person felt incredulous after seeing the memorials sent by the Western City Army. With 400,000 people, even if one of them pissed, they would be able to destroy Sanchi City. Furthermore, the North Army had other uses. Taking the opportunity of attacking Dayo and taking back the authority of the warlords, how could they send the North Army to the west? Tell him that he will only send other reinforcements when there is progress in the war. The Western Garrison Army broke their legs from running around in Wangjing. In the end, they only obtained another 20 ballistae. In addition to the previous ones, they had a total of 60 ballistae. Each ballistae could fire 132 bolts in one round. This was the latest military equipment developed by the Yun nation. The Western City Army walked out of the yamen and spat unwillingly. They had no choice but to go back and report to the commander while cursing. This bunch of bastards. 400,000 soldiers. What use was the coalition army of the warlords? Only the 180,000 soldiers of the Western City Army were useful. However, they were going to attack the city now. The 15,000 barbarians were equivalent to at least 150,000 soldiers. Even a fool knew that attacking a city required at least a few times the number of soldiers. Now that the ratio of military strength was almost 1-to-1, even if the Western City army was drained of blood, they might not be able to take down Sanchi City. After receiving the news, Zhu Wuzhen pondered for a night and wrote another letter. There is a saying in the art of war: surround the enemy 10 times, attack 5 times, and divide the enemy. A month ago, Great Xia besieged Ping City and Shun City but did not attack. Zhu Wuzhen first elaborated on the art of war, but this time, he didn't want the North Army. Instead, he wanted the cities to continue sending reinforcements. In the letter, he first explained that it was impossible to attack Sanchi City with the current military strength. Even the 700,000 soldiers of Great Xia besieged Ping City and Shun City but did not attack. Instead, the Western City army went straight in. Since he couldn't send the North Army, he wanted the cities to continue sending reinforcements. With at least 200,000 reinforcements, he could besiege Sanchi City and split some of his troops to attack Dayo. If Sanchi City sent reinforcements, it would be in line with his intentions. Whether it was besieging the troops or continuing to attack Sanchi City, it would achieve the desired effect. They could advance and retreat at will and were in an invincible position. If Sanchi City didn't send troops to attack, it would be like Great Xia and mainly destroy Dayo's fields and villages. If most of the fields and pastures in the north and east were destroyed, Dayo's harvest this year could be imagined. When the Qin nation sent troops, it would be a pincer attack. There was danger outside and a famine inside. Naturally, Dayo wouldn't be able to withstand it. As the combat strength of the city's armies would be reduced when they joined forces, most of the warlords' armies would be sent into Dayo. Military merits would be calculated according to the number of enemies killed. Even the commoners would be counted as aboriginal soldiers. For Zhu Wuzhen, this was the best method he could use at present. Since the imperial court didn't want to send the North Army and wholeheartedly focused on the warlords, he would help them. If 300,000 warlords were thrown into Dayo, even 300,000 ants would be able to bite a few people to death, let alone 300,000 soldiers. When the time came, the cities would act on their own. This would prevent the result of not increasing but decreasing their combat strength. Military merits would also be calculated for the commoners, and there would be no need to worry about them not contributing. It would be best if they could lure the aboriginal soldiers out of Sanchi City. Even if they couldn't, they could still create a lot of trouble for Dayo. As he said, as long as the fields of Dayo were destroyed, there would definitely be a famine in Dayo this year. Even if the Yun nation couldn't win this war, it wouldn't be defeated even if they didn't win on the battlefield. Even if they didn't win on the battlefield, as long as they could drag down Dayo, it would be considered a victory. He would continue to do what Great Xia hadn't finished. He was using Wu Xinghuo's method to bully Dayo's small population. No matter how strong Dayo was, there were only so many soldiers. As long as they attacked more, they would be able to make the other party lose focus and reveal flaws. At present, the imperial court was thinking about how to weaken the cities. Zhu Wuzhen's request could be said to be in line with everyone's wishes. Just as he expected, the imperial court immediately agreed. Chapter 400. In the imperial court, the Empress took out 2 bright red, rectangular, flat, and fine bricks from the side of the throne. With a wave of her hand, one of them flew out, followed by the other. One of the officials from the Public Order Bureau and the Department of the Army, who were fighting below, was hit on the head by a flying brick. Then, the other was hit on the head by a flying brick. Your Majesty! Both of them stopped fighting, turned around, and cupped their hands toward the Empress. The Empress patted the dust off her hands and was very satisfied. This thing was really easy to handle. Whether it was the weight or the shape, it felt different when she threw it, and its accuracy was extremely high. It seemed like she had to carry a few more bricks with her in the future. Nowadays, bricks were still a rarity in Dayo. They were only used in glass factories, cement factories, and blast furnaces. Most of the commoners had never seen them before. It wasn't like Earth, where materials could be found anywhere. The militia is still under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of War, the Empress said faintly. However, this name doesn't sound good. Change it. After the Empress returned, this was the first time she attended court. After settling some other matters, she raised the issue of the militia. In fact, this matter had already been carried out. Because of the urgency of the war, the cities and towns in the north of Dayo had basically been established. There was still no movement in other areas, and they were waiting for the Empress to come back and officially arrange this matter. Just now, the officials from the Public Order Bureau and the Department of the Army had quarreled over which department would be responsible for the militia. However, both of them weren't good with words, so they simply vented their hatred with their fists. Of course, even if one of them had a sharp tongue, the result would still be the same. In addition to the two of them, Minister of War Qin Chuan and Minister of Justice Lu Yidao were also staring at each other with a "kill you" look. If the Empress didn't stop them, after the two officials were done fighting, it would be time for the two of them to put on a show. Shi Qing thought for a while and said, "Since the people are the army, why don't we call it the militia? What's the difference from the militia?" The Empress looked at him sideways. "Why don't we call it the reserve army?" Qin Chuan suggested. It turned out that it was a mistake for the Empress to let these officials think of names. "Principal Ren, do you have any ideas?" After hearing 7 or 8 names in a row, the Empress helplessly looked at Renbaqian, who was in the middle. It was rare for Renbaqian to attend a court session. He personally witnessed 2 rank 4 officials fighting over a few words. Immediately, he understood why the Empress was so calm during the banquet. He was the only newcomer here, so he simply looked down and pretended to be daydreaming. Now that he heard the Empress call his name, Renbaqian had no choice but to step forward and say, "Why don't we call the city enforcement team? Therefore, this militia should be under the jurisdiction of the Public Order Bureau." From its name, you can tell that it's a department under the Public Order Bureau. Bai Shiying immediately followed up on Renbaqian's words. "Ugh!" Renbaqian saw that everyone from the Ministry of War was staring at him. He reckoned that they were wondering which part of his body was more resistant to beatings. "Why don't we call them the guards?" Renbaqian quickly changed his mind. This time, it was the people from the Ministry of Justice who were glaring at him. "It's better for your Majesty to decide on the specific name." After saying this, Renbaqian continued to look down. He made up his mind that it would be better for him not to attend court sessions for no reason in the future. If someone were to give him a beating one day, he wouldn't be able to reason with them. "Let's call them the guards, and they will be under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of War. Depending on the size of each town, there will be 1,000 to 3,000 people. They will do what they are supposed to do. Every year, they will have 3 months of training. During the training period, they will provide food and weapons." The Empress made the final decision. Following which, Renbaqian continued to daydream. He only came back to his senses when he heard the words, "A court session is dismissed." After lunch, he summoned Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng, the 2 managers of the caravan. "Sir." In Pingle Park, Renbaqian was teasing the panda. He flipped Tian Tian on the ground with its belly facing the sky and scratched the area near Tiantian's little penis. The panda was so angry that it opened its mouth to bite him, but Renbaqian pressed its head back with one hand. He realized that the panda didn't seem to like people scratching the area near its belly. Every time he scratched that area, Tian Tian and Gun Gun would bite him, but he didn't get tired of it. "You are here. How are your injuries?" Renbaqian finally let go of Tian Tian, who had been tortured by him for half a day. He raised his head and smiled. Tian Tian quickly got up and walked away while groaning. Its voice was filled with grievance. Thanks to Sir, my injuries have mostly recovered, the two of them replied. Well, the situation is chaotic now. There are battles everywhere. Both of you should rest for a while. At the same time, help me collect some things. Sir, please speak. Ren Baqian looked at the two of them. Perhaps it was because they had more dealings with people from other nations, the way they spoke was different from ordinary aboriginals. They were more polite and didn't speak as gruffly. Ren Baqian returned to his room, took out a piece of paper, and handed it to the two of them. Collect according to this. Collect 45 sets first. On the paper were the medicinal herbs that Ren Baqian needed to practice martial arts. He needed 1 set every week for a medicinal bath. 45 sets could be used for 10 months. The 7,000 taels of gold that the two of them brought back was equivalent to 70,000 taels of silver, which was barely enough to purchase 50 sets. However, Ren Baqian only allowed them to collect 45 sets. The two of us will do our best. After the two of them looked through the paper, Tang Feng folded it and carefully kept it in his pocket. You can split the rest of the money. After all, Her Majesty doesn't need hungry soldiers. However, the age and quality of the things that I want must be of the highest quality. Don't make any mistakes. Thank you, sir. The two of them thanked him sincerely. Ren Baqian had made a mistake and obtained 7,000 taels of silver. To the two of them, it was a huge sum of money. Naturally, their subordinates had to get some as well. Also, for those who died outside, they had to send some back home as well. Even so, this was still a big reward for everyone. You don't have to collect all the things in one go. However, send a batch back as soon as possible. I am still waiting to use them. Ren Baqian waved his hand after he finished speaking. You may leave. After the two of them left, Ren Baqian sat in the garden for a while. He called the guards over and asked them to inform the students that school would start in 3 days. As the guards searched the houses one by one according to the addresses, it was a scene of chaos everywhere. When Ren Baqian wasn't around, they more or less missed school. After all, they could learn a lot of things that they had never heard before. However, when Ren Baqian returned, the image of him waving his gun and flying into a rage reappeared in everyone's mind. Especially the damn homework. For the past 2 months, they had been playing wild. It was as if they had returned to the carefree days of drinking and fighting. Homework had long been thrown to the back of their minds. Did anyone inform you? There are still 3 days left. A few students gathered together with a bitter look on their faces. Don't mention it. How did time pass so quickly? It feels like we haven't even played for a few days, and Yague is already back. Do you know who has finished their homework? Now, homework was the most pressing issue. There were still 3 days left, and they wouldn't be able to finish it even if they burned the midnight oil every day. If they had a choice, they really wanted to borrow another 500 days from the heavens. Tong Lan seems to have finished her homework. I saw her the other day. Although she didn't say it, she seemed to have finished it, someone immediately suggested. That little fellow might not lend it to us to copy, right? We have to try. With so many of us going together, I don't believe that she won't lend it to us. Go, go, go. An hour later, along with a few screams, the little Lolita, Tong Lan, clapped her hands and instructed the others, throw these piles of trash out. Then, she returned to her room and continued to do her homework while gnashing her teeth. The students of the Black Bamboo Academy began to rack their brains after Ren Baqian informed them of the school's opening date. Chapter 401. Jinyuan City wasn't considered a big city in Great Xia, but it had a population of tens of thousands. It was morning, and it was a little chilly in May. Dozens of people formed a long line in front of the gate. They could only enter after paying the entrance fee. There were farmers who wanted to enter the city with their own vegetables, hunters who brought along mountain delicacies, and a few people who were dressed in green robes and carried long swords. It was obvious that they were scholars who were out traveling. "Is the earth dragon turning over?" someone shouted when he felt the tremors under his feet. Everyone revealed a panicked expression and wanted to run towards the open space. As long as the earth dragon turning over wasn't too serious, it would be safe as long as it was in an open space. More than a decade ago, an earth dragon turning over happened here. Thousands of people were buried in collapsed houses in the middle of the night. The people here still remembered it vividly. "Don't panic, it's a cavalry," a knowledgeable scholar said with a smile. "Ordinary people can't see a cavalry unit, so it's normal to have such a misunderstanding." Another scholar patted his shoulder and said, "I can't compare to you two brothers. To be honest, I've never seen a cavalry unit. If you two didn't say anything, I'm afraid I would have thought that it was an earth dragon turning over." A thinner scholar cupped his hands in obeisance. "Why would a cavalry unit come here at this time?" The first scholar to speak was puzzled. His name was Li Mengyuan, and he was quite famous in his hometown. His uncle was a fifth-rank military officer. "That's the imperial court's business. I think they're going to the south." The thinner scholar was obviously not interested in this. "Xingyan, don't say that. The nation's business is the world's business. How can the world's business have nothing to do with us? When we enter the imperial court, we have to pay more attention to everything," Li Mengyuan warned. "You're right, brother. Thank you for your advice." The thinner scholar cupped his hands in obeisance. His name was Yao Xingyan. They turned their heads and saw a black line on the distant horizon, followed by a long earth dragon. "I didn't expect Wu Xingho to be defeated." Other than Li Mengyuan and Yao Xingyan, there was another scholar called Su Pingji. He was the one who sighed. "I really didn't expect it. The imperial court has prepared for so many years. 700,000 soldiers and countless rations have all gone down the drain." Li Mengyuan shook his head. "Are those Dayo people really like what the legends say?" Yao Xingyan asked. Now that Great Xia had lost the war, everyone on the streets and alleys were talking about Dayo as if they were gods. According to the commoners, the people of Dayo wore leather skirts, bared their upper bodies, and let out barbaric howls during battle. An ordinary soldier was 8 feet tall and could carry a rod that weighed a few hundred kilograms. With a swing of the rod, he could send a person flying. "You've heard about it too." Li Mengyuan laughed. He had also heard of this rumor. "It's not as exaggerated as the rumors say, but it's indeed powerful. Ordinary soldiers in Dayo are at the man-will level, and they can even become team leaders in Dayo. Even the commoners could attain the man-will level. Fortunately, there weren't many of them. The entire Dayo had less than 100,000 soldiers. In addition, the officials were vulgar and did not understand military affairs or military equipment. That's why I've always been content with this one," Li Mengyuan explained. At this time, the transmission of information wasn't very advanced. Most of the information was based on falsehoods. Ordinary people knew very little about Dayo. His family had a military background and knew a little more about Dayo. "That's still very powerful," Yao Xingyan replied after thinking for a while. He knew the strength of a man-will expert. An ordinary man-will expert would be able to make a name for himself wherever he went. In Great Xia's military system, 10 people formed a battalion, and 5 battalions formed a team. A team leader would be in charge of 50 people. As long as a man-will expert joined the army, he would be in charge of at least 50 people. From this, one could see the status of a man-will expert in Great Xia. It was somewhat exaggerated that the commoners of Dao were all man-will experts. Do they eat people? Yao Xingyan asked again. Many people on the streets and alleys swore that the barbarians in the south ate people. He had been curious about this matter for a long time. Were there really people who ate people? Although the people of Dao were barbaric and backward, they were still human. Upon hearing this, Li Mengyuan frowned. After thinking for a while, he said, I'm not sure about this matter either. However, I think there might be a reason for this groundless rumor. Just as they were chatting, there was a sudden exclamation from the top of the city wall, it's the people of Dao. Close the city gate, quickly close the city gate. At the same time, the sound of drums was heard from the top of the city wall and transmitted into the city. People of Dao. The three scholars were startled. They turned their heads and looked in the direction of the cavalry. Doubts emerged in their minds. This was the hinterland of Great Xia. Why were the people of Dao here? Could it be that the border was lost? Even if the border was lost, it was impossible for them to fight their way here so quickly, right? Nearby, there were anxious shouts from other people, quickly let us in. After a while, the city gates slowly closed. Li Mengyuan pulled a guard who was running down from the city wall and asked, how many people are there? Can they defend? That guard was already anxious. After being pulled by someone, he couldn't shake him off even after trying twice. He realized that the other party was quite strong. Seeing that the guard was still a scholar, he replied, I don't know. All the people in the army have been transferred away. Now, there are only 1,000 people in the city. Upon hearing this, Li Mengyuan immediately let go of him. It's over. Li Mengyuan's face turned deathly pale. The other two also heard it clearly, and their faces turned pale. Judging from the dust raised by the cavalry in the distance, there are at least 2,000 to 3,000 people. Furthermore, Dao's soldiers are at least at the man-will level. For the elite winged cavalry, only earth-will experts can enter. 1,000 people can't defend at all, Li Mengyuan muttered to himself. Previously, when Great Xia attacked the south, most of the soldiers in the country were transferred away. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be any problems. After all, there were still some guards left in every city. However, now that Dao was here, the defensive line formed by these guards was too weak. It was as if it would be torn apart at any moment. Who's babbling nonsense? If you continue to mislead people with your lies, I'll behead you first. Not far away, someone scolded angrily. Li Mengyuan looked up and realized that the other party was dressed like a captain. He calmed himself down and apologized, sorry, I was distracted for a moment. Although his face was pale, he managed to calm down. What do we do now? The other two looked at him. Let's find a place to hide first. Now that it's chaotic, we shouldn't stay outside. Li Mengyuan hurriedly pulled the other two into the city. Currently, the city was also in chaos. Hearing that Dao was attacking, there were anxious shouts of adults and cries of children everywhere. There were also soldiers on horses galloping madly in the city, constantly shouting, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Are we really unable to defend?" Su Pingji whispered. It's difficult. Li Mengyuan shook his head. However, it's not that there's no chance. There should be many experts from the martial arts schools in the city. If we gather them together, they might be of some use. Li Mengyuan knew that even then, the chances were very slim. However, this was the only chance they had. If the two armies confronted each other, they wouldn't stand a chance at all. However, if they were to defend the city, they would more or less be of some use. If they were lucky, after the Dao people realized that Jinyu City wasn't easy to deal with, they might turn to other cities. Those Dayo people probably didn't attack from the border. They might have come from the Liaoning mountain range. It's impossible for them to have siege equipment. How are they going to break the city walls? Su Pingji asked. That's why I said there's still a glimmer of hope. It all depends on whether the experts from the martial arts schools can stop the Dayo people from rushing into the city to open the city gates, Li Mengyuan explained. One had to know that the current city gates were usually made of a palm-thick wooden plank with 2 layers of iron plates. This was to prevent experts from breaking the city gates. Chapter 402. Stop. Following the order, thousands of hungry Aboriginal soldiers stopped 1.5 kilometers away from Jinyu City. They looked at the city, subconsciously licked their lips, and their eyes glowed. According to the plan, they should have attacked another city at least 7 days ago. However, the tragedy was that they actually went the wrong way. They were delayed for a full 7 days before they came out of the mountain range. If they hadn't caught a lot of wild beasts and picked some wild fruits, which somewhat delayed the livestock they brought with them, they would have had to kill their mounts to appease their hunger. Even so, thousands of people were so hungry that their chests were sticking to their backs. Their stomachs were rumbling, and they couldn't wait to attack the city in front of them to have a big meal. Li Chinchou rode his 4-corned cow to the front of the troops. He looked at the top of the city with a pair of binoculars and saw terrified faces. He roughly looked at the number of people and immediately felt relieved. There were only a few hundred people at the top of the city wall. As expected, the interior of Great Xia was also empty, and there was nothing that could stop this army. The winged cavalry, open the city gate and arrest all those who resisted. The 1st and 2nd battalions will control the 4 city gates. The rest will collect food and livestock first. The rest will also gather at the magistrate office in the city. Li Chinchou waved his hand. It wasn't difficult to attack this city. Even if there was some resistance, they weren't a match for the nearly 1,000 Earth-Will winged cavalry warriors. The next step was to snatch food. Snatch food. Snatch food. Kill. Break the city. Kill. Following Li Qianqiu's order, the 1,000 winged cavalry warriors dismounted, held their sabers, and rushed toward Jinyu City in the distance. It took them less than 3 minutes to cover the 1.5 kilometers. Sparse arrows were shot from the top of the city wall. To these Earth-Will winged cavalry warriors, these arrows couldn't even disturb them. Many of them grabbed them with their bare hands and threw them back. Then, the figures jumped 7 to 8 meters with the help of a run-up, and with a single kick, they flipped over the city wall. 100 ordinary soldiers wouldn't be able to defeat 1 winged cavalry warrior. Not to mention the current situation, where it was almost 2 winged cavalry warriors against 1 ordinary soldier. It was equivalent to 2 tigers staring at a little white rabbit. When the guards on the city wall saw these Dayo people actually jump up the city wall that was 10 meters high, their legs went soft, and they couldn't move. Rays of saber gleam lit up. Screams of death could be heard coming from the city walls. A moment later, the city gate was opened. To this army, the resistance in the city was like a delicate little Lolita shyly pushing away a 2-meter-tall man who weighed 300 kilograms. Enter the city. Li Qianqiu ordered. By the time everyone entered the city gate, the winged cavalry had already charged towards the magistrate office in the middle. Along the way, they encountered some resistance. The Great Xia officials had gathered some famous martial artists in the city, but just as they gathered, the city gate was broken. Then, more than a dozen Earth-Will experts faced nearly 1,000 winged cavalry warriors. At that time, their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. However, the winged cavalry didn't listen to their nagging and immediately slashed down with their sabers. In the end, only 2 of them managed to escape from the city. Of the 3,000 soldiers, half went to control the 4 city gates, while the other half began to loot everywhere. One by one, the winged cavalry warriors kicked open the tightly shut doors of the houses, glared at them, and shouted, "Hand over all the food." Those great Xia commoners were already scared to death. When their doors were kicked open, they were completely disheartened. In the end, they heard the burly man holding the saber say, "Hand over all the food." Trembling, they immediately put all the food in their houses into a bag and handed it over. Then, the burly man carried the food to the next house. The great Xia commoners were left to heave a sigh of relief after shutting their doors tightly. The small one that Li Mengyuan and the other 2 were hiding in was not spared either. When there was a commotion in the courtyard, the 3 of them were in their throats. In the end, those Dayo soldiers actually snatched the food and left, leaving the 3 of them hiding in the room dumbfounded. They are here to snatch the food. Dayo doesn't even have food to eat. I've long heard that Dayo is a barren land, but I didn't expect it to be so poor. Yao Xingyan was a little dumbfounded. In the records of previous wars, there was never a rule that only food was taken after the city was breached. Most of them plundered wantonly, and many of them raped and pillaged. After a disaster, even if every family wasn't in mourning, they would at least be in mourning. Yet, these Dayo people came in and snatched the food. They didn't care about anything else and just left. This was really beyond his expectations. I hope we will be safe this time. The other 2 were now focused on preserving their lives. Ever since they knew that Dayo was going to attack the city, the 2 of them had been worried. In the chaos of war, there was nowhere to run. If they were careless, they might lose their heads. Now that those Dayo people had snatched the food, it couldn't be any better. Before noon, the original magistrate's office was piled up with a huge pile of food. There were very few livestock. Most of them were chickens and ducks, and a small number were horses and cows. Most of them were coarse rice and other grains. From noon until late at night, the smoke in the magistrate's office didn't stop. Thousands of people ate lunch, dinner, and supper after dinner. Those coarse rice and other grains were really not of much use as they could barely replenish their blood. If they needed 5 kilograms of meat, this kind of coarse rice would need 20 to 15 kilograms. Almost everyone had to eat half a pot to barely replenish their body's needs. However, as they moved, they soon felt hungry again. From afternoon until late at night, all the soldiers were in a cycle of eating, going out to scavenge for food, sending it back to the magistrate's office, eating, going out to scavenge for food, and eating again. The next day, dozens of scholars were captured in the city. Li Mengyuan and the other 2 were among them. The dozens of scholars were like livestock waiting to be slaughtered as they trembled in the middle. Surrounding them were tall and strong men holding gleaming steel sabers. Li Mengyuan and the others were ashen-faced. They didn't know what these Dayo people were going to do. Distribute paper and pens to them. I'll speak, and you guys write. Once you're done, I'll let you go, Li Qinqiu said in a deep voice as he stood on the steps in front of everyone. Only then did everyone feel a little more at ease. After the papers and pens were distributed, a few scholars sat cross-legged on the ground. The others followed suit and spread the papers on the ground. They sat cross-legged and prepared to write. Li Qinqiu took out a piece of paper and read from it. Xia Baichong is ruthless and tyrannical. For his own selfish reasons, he led troops to attack Dayo. Now, he has suffered heavy casualties, and 500,000 great Xia soldiers are buried in foreign lands. However, isn't Dayo innocent for suffering this calamity? Great Xia has to compensate Dayo for the funeral expenses, city repairs, farmland damage, mental damage, felling of trees, cleaning of garbage, and burying of corpses. A total of 105 million taels of silver. A life for a life, a debt for a debt, and compensation for damage is a matter of course. Xiao Baichong did something wrong, but didn't want to bear the consequences and refused to pay compensation. Dayo will collect it ourselves. If you want to blame someone, blame Xiao Baichong. After Li Qinqiu finished speaking, he rubbed his head and cursed, "What the f***ck? What kind of nonsense is this? What are you looking at? Why aren't you writing?" Li Qinqiu scowled at those scholars who were in a daze. "If the monarch is insulted, the officials will die. You have insulted our monarch, so I'd rather die than write." A scholar threw his pen away, raised his head, and scolded. "Drag him out and behead him. Where is his home? Behead him together." Li Qinqiu waved his hand, and that scholar was dragged out. "I will take responsibility for my own actions and not implicate my family," that scholar cursed as he was dragged away. "This is called reuniting your family so that you won't be lonely on the road." Li Qinqiu had a look of disdain on his face. "You are really uncultured. How can you call yourself a scholar?" With a flash of the saber, a person's head fell off, and fresh blood spurted out for several meters. "Go and ask who captured him, where his home is, and send him and his family on their way." Li Qinqiu looked at the guards beside him and said to the crowd below, "Principal Ren once said that the most important thing for a family is to be reunited. I deeply agree with this. Are you going to write or die?" Seeing that scholar get beheaded, everyone felt sorrowful. This group of damned barbarians. Everyone cursed in their hearts, but they didn't dare to express it. No one wanted to test whether their neck was harder or the saber was sharper. Furthermore, this group of barbarians didn't just kill people, but also harmed their entire families. Such means made it impossible for them to resist. However, which was more important, life or integrity? For the majority of people, life was more important. They could only comfort themselves that even if they didn't write, someone else would. After a while, Li Qinqiu held the paper that he had written and said meaningfully, "That's why the more books you read, the worse you are and the more timid you become." His words made everyone's faces turn red with anger. Half a day later, these pieces of paper were pasted all over the main locations of Golden City. Li Qinqiu had been plundering Golden City for 2 full days, and almost all the livestock had been gathered together. In addition, there was also a large amount of gold, silver, jewelry, and salt, which were all plundered from those shops and wealthy families. As for those small families, Li Qinqiu couldn't be bothered with them. He only needed to grab the most valuable things. Grabbing too many things would be detrimental to the operation. To the ordinary people of Golden City, this was a blessing in disguise. Find a few people who know the way and set off tomorrow. Li Qinqiu instructed the people beside him. This time, he wasn't going to take a detour. 2 hours later, Li Mengyuan and the other two appeared in front of Li Qinqiu again. Nowadays, most of the ordinary people had never been more than 50 kilometers away from Golden City. Li Mengyuan and the other two scholars were unlucky enough to fall into Li Qinqiu's evil clutches. Chapter 403. Have I seen you guys before? Li Qinqiu was puzzled when he saw the 3 emaciated people in front of him. In his eyes, the people of Great Xia were mostly emaciated. In other words, the aboriginals felt that the people of other races were as skinny as chicks. "General, the 3 of us were the ones who wrote the notice just now," the 3 of them said miserably. "According to what you Great Xia people say, the 3 of you are fated with us." Li Qinqiu was amused. The 3 of them couldn't cry even if they wanted to. Fated my ass. Who wanted to be fated? You guys will set off with us tomorrow to lead the way to Yechi City. Do you know the location? Li Qinqiu asked in a deep voice. Great General, we really don't know. The 3 of them immediately shook their heads. They were supposed to lead the way. It was still reasonable for them to write the notice, but if it was proven that they were supposed to lead the way, the three of them would die a horrible death. Everyone in Yechi City would hate the three of them to death. The imperial court would definitely execute them to appease the commoners. They might even implicate their families. Oh. Li Chinchou nodded and casually said, "Take them away and execute them." "General, spare us." The three of them broke out in cold sweat. "Take them away and execute them." Li Chinchou ignored them. Since it was useless, he would just execute them. As for whether they really didn't know or not, he didn't care. "Sir, I will lead the way. I will go and inquire about Yechi City right now." Yao Xingyan struggled with all his might, but the burly man's hands were like iron pincers that rendered him immobile. His head was full of cold sweat as he shouted. He really hadn't been to Yechi City before, but he couldn't care less now that his life was in danger. "Oh. Behead those two and leave this one," Li Chinchou said coldly. "Sir, I remember now. I have heard of Yechi City and know its approximate location," Li Mengyuan quickly shouted. "Sir, spare us. I remember now too. I can find Yechi City." Su Pingji shouted. What did it mean for a scholar to meet a soldier? This was it. Regardless of what they were thinking, the other party simply ignored them and dragged them away to be beheaded. The three of them were really scared after seeing a bloody head in the afternoon. "Ha!" Li Chinchou sneered. That was why he hated these scholars. They were full of evil tricks and had no backbone. Night Pond City was in the vicinity of Golden City, only 1 day away. The three of them even beat around the bush when begging for their lives, which made him look down on them. "Hang the three of them on a pole and bring them with you tomorrow. If the three of them try anything funny, kill them immediately," Li Chinchou said before leaving. Not long after, 3 pillars were erected in the mansion, each with a person tied to it. The three of them were tied to the pillars and exposed to the cold wind. Their hearts were incomparably desolate. Right now, they really couldn't call for help from the heavens or the earth. Encountering such a group of death gods, the three of them had no way of dealing with them. "If I had known, I wouldn't have entered the city in the morning." Li Mengyuan sighed as he was tied to a pillar. The three of them had stayed at a farmer's house outside the city last night and rushed into the city early this morning. They didn't expect to encounter such a thing. "What do we do next?" Su Pingji asked with a dark face. "Let's take one step at a time. If we bring them to Night Pond City, I'm afraid the three of us will go down in the history books and bear countless curses," Li Mengyuan lamented. After Li Mengyuan finished speaking, the three of them fell silent. The three of them were well aware of the situation. However, their heads were almost chopped off just now. If we don't lead the way, they will find someone else to lead the way. Yao Xingyan defended himself and the three of them. The three of them could comfort themselves, but the imperial court and the people of Night Pond City wouldn't forgive them for this reason. Early the next morning, Li Chinchou let the three of them down and threw them into the group to travel with the rest. No one was afraid that they would escape. It would be a huge joke if these 3 scholars could escape from their hands. A day later, this army broke into Night Pond City again. Snatching food, snatching food, snatching food. It was a little different from what they had imagined before. Now, snatching food had become their main task. Night Pond City was slightly smaller than Golden City. Even though the 2 warriors who had escaped from Golden City had come to inform them, they still couldn't stop the iron hooves of this army. In the blink of an eye, the city was breached. The only thing that annoyed Li Chinchou was that many of the wealthy merchants in the city had run away. Within 3 days, 2 cities were suddenly breached by the Dayo army. Great Xia was shaken. Xia Bailong smashed countless cups in one day, spat out blood, and collapsed. He didn't need to ask to know what was going on among the people. However, he didn't have the military strength to stop this Dayo army that suddenly appeared. If this continued, he would probably be the only emperor who allowed the enemy army to roam freely in his country during his reign. How could he accept this? "Your Majesty, this bird can speak." Renbochin carried the birdcage and ran to the Empress's hall excitedly. It wasn't strange for birds to speak. There were many parrots and mynas that could learn to speak. However, this bird was extremely intelligent and seemed to be able to think on its own, which made him feel strange. In the hall, the Empress resumed her life of curling up on the sofa and watching television dramas. When she saw Renbochin coming over, she only took a glance at him before returning her gaze to her notebook. "When will my wine pool be built?" "I'm afraid it will take some time," Renbochin replied. How many years would it take to fill up a wine pool with more than 600 kilograms of wine? It was better to think of ways to get some food to brew wine himself. "Come, give me a smile." Renbochin squatted on the sofa, carried the birdcage, and poked the gray clown bird inside with his finger. "Smile my ass. Do you think I'm a prostitute who sells smiles? Why would I give you a smile? Can't you take a look at your silly behavior?" The clown bird opened its bean-sized eyes and scolded. Renbochin's face turned black. This bird wasn't like this when he bought it just now. It was actually quite obedient and cute. "Damn it, I've been tricked." Renbochin reached into the birdcage, pinched the bird that was flapping its wings and flying around, and exerted force with his thumb and index finger. Click. The entire world became quiet. Renbochin threw the cage aside and cursed in his heart. Damn it! Did this silly bird really think that it was a master? The Empress turned her head and looked at him with a smile. "I saw it. This bird can indeed talk." Quality education. Nowadays, not only are people's hearts no longer ancient, but even birds' hearts are no longer ancient. Renbochin thought about it and felt a little regretful. That bird was actually quite intelligent. Just based on its intelligence, he would definitely be able to train it well if he put a knife to its neck. It was a pity that he didn't have the chance to train it. Forget it, there were many interesting things in this world. "Your Majesty, do you want to go out for a walk?" Renbochin asked the Empress. He had been out of the palace for the past 2 days when he had nothing to do. He first went to the Ministry of Works to discuss the blast furnace and the construction of the cement factory with Tongjianye. After all, the roads would be ready in a few days, and the cement factory had to be expanded first. When the cement factory was completed, everything would be ready, and all that was left was the labor from the Yun nation. Apart from this, he wandered around the city and often saw some interesting things in the hands of some Aboriginal people, especially in the Yeola district. There were many interesting things in the stalls along the streets. He had just bought this little black bird from one of the Aboriginal people's stalls. "No, I still have to finish reading this." The Empress immediately rejected him and looked back at the laptop screen. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.